Reincarnated by mistake, Roy becomes the supreme alchemist with divine powers. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. A boy finds himself enveloped in a strange light, unsure of what's happening. Suddenly, he's taken to a goddess named Nolan, who explains that he was summoned to Midgard by a spell from another world. It turns out he was mistakenly caught in the summoning of others, so the goddess apologizes for the mix-up. The boy, even more confused, listens as she clarifies that world summoning involves countless targets across myriad worlds. For some reason, the boy, not originally intended to be summoned, got caught up in it. This poses a huge problem, as the summoning spell is incredibly dangerous. The laws of this world and Earth differ significantly, risking the collapse of Midgard itself, which is why the spell was banned. However, one nation recklessly activated it again. The boy asks if others were also summoned, but Nolan says no. The intended targets were summoned to the Holy Empire of Sidonia, where the spell was activated. Feeling helpless, the boy asks to be sent back, but Nolan can't oblige. She's so incensed that she fixed things to ensure the forbidden spell would never be used again. Moreover, the boy doesn't even have a body to return to. At this, he realizes he is just a sphere of light and wonders about his fate. Nolan asks him to give up on returning and try starting a new life in Midgard. Hopeless, he inquires if he might be summoned to Sidonia, but the goddess explains that place is too troubled, and considering his accidental presence there, he'd likely be treated poorly in the Holy Empire. Feeling guilty for her actions, she considers sending him to a fantasy world with her full support. Meanwhile, the human only feels anxiety, as facing goblins and dragons isn't exactly appealing. However, Nolan assures him her support will be crucial. She then asks him to visualize the word status. Upon doing so, a panel appears with information about the boy. His name is Takumi Aruma, 17 years old, but he's confused about the class section since he was a salaried worker in his previous life, and it states he has no class. Nolan believes the past doesn't matter and explains there are no salaried workers in Midgard. In this world, there are heroes, warriors, and mages in the combat class, while the production class includes herbalists, alchemists, blacksmiths, and more. Takumi, not fond of fighting, sees himself in the production class. Finding his comment exceedingly dull, Nolan suggests that if Takumi utilizes the skills acquired through his actions, he might find employment. If he wishes to pursue production, the goddess can provide him with a useful spell for that, as well as recovery magic for protection and a few other things for his adventure. With that, she conjures a magical diamond and integrates it into the lost boy. He experiences a severe headache, but the goddess, ignoring this, wishes him a good journey in the continent of Asgard and sends him there without further explanation. Sometime later, a light streaks across the sky at high speed, crashing heavily into the ground. After partially recovering, Takumi stands up from the terrible experience and heads to a lake where he sees his reflection in the water and no longer recognizes himself. Gradually, he realizes this is his new appearance, which incidentally is much better looking than in his past life. With this, it becomes slightly easier for the boy to forget his past. Opening his bag, he finds some food and money to last him a while. Checking his status, Takumi sees the blessing of Goddess Nolan and thinks it could cause trouble if people from there discover this. He also notices the item box, something familiar from RPG games he played on Earth. Additionally, Takumi has level 1 elemental spells of fire and water. Curious, he wonders if he can actually use these abilities. Fearing the spread of a fire spell, the boy summons a water ball and is impressed. Next, he casts a wind slash and then a stone ball. Through these actions, he realizes he truly is in a fantasy world. Regardless, Takumi needs to find a village, so he heads deeper into the forest in search of a logical path. At one point, he finds a log and uses his evaluation skill to discover it's treant wood, a high-quality resource collected from treant monsters used in staves, magical items, and spears. Seeing this, Takumi thinks he could work with this wood using his forging ability. Without delay, he visualizes a spear and activates the shaping, crafting a spear and acquiring the skill carpentry. Since he was able to use this wood, Takumi surveys the surrounding area to do something similar with local plants. Around him, dozens of plants form what he sees as a veritable treasure trove for potion and poison making, so he gathers a huge amount of ingredients but doesn't know what to do with all of it, as it certainly wouldn't fit in his bag. Then Takumi remembers his item box, a storage gift from Goddess Nolan with an infinite limit. He places the ingredients inside. In the midst of this, a little girl appears, running desperately and hiding behind him. It turns out a huge horned rabbit was chasing her, so Takumi grabs his spear to defend himself. When the rabbit attacks, the boy closes his eyes in terror and strikes with his weapon. Luckily, the blade hits the animal's head and kills it. Because of this, Takumi gains the warrior class level 1, although he didn't want it. When the little girl thanks him for the help, she mentions she came from Board Village. She was collecting medicinal herbs and got lost in the forest. Hearing this, Takumi asks to accompany the girl to the village, which she accepts without hesitation. Thus, the boy collects the horned rabbit, but realizes he made a mistake by revealing the item box and now leaving the girl agape with this black hole from hell. One way or another, life goes on. So the girl tells him her name is Molly, and the two head toward Board Village. Meanwhile, in the sacred empire of Sidonia, the other summoned individuals look around trying to understand where they are. A boy asks if Akane is okay, and she admits she's not, but the important thing is to figure out what's happening. Soon, as the trio discusses the situation, a woman appears, thanking them for responding to the summons. Faced with demands for an explanation, she reveals that they are in a completely different world, summoned to use their powers as heroes to save this world. The mysterious woman then introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first empress of the sacred empire of Sidonia. Following this, the three summoned receive their powers. Akane gains the power of revelation, feeling inside that she cannot trust this strange woman as she seems dangerous. Later, Takumi arrives in Board Village and returns Molly to her relatives, who thank him for his help. The boy asks if he could stay in the village for a few days, and Molly's relatives agree, mentioning that the area is rich in ingredients for medicine and has nearby minerals, making Board a paradise for craftsmen. A younger man introduces an older one as Boban, a blacksmith skilled in mining, and Takumi is grateful for the opportunity to stay. Notably, as there are no inns in Board, the villagers decide to build a house for the visitor, something he did not expect. Soon, they find a small empty space in the territory for Takumi's residence. To show he's not just sitting around, the boy levels the ground with his magic, but it drains so much mana that he nearly fries his brain. The men are impressed by the foreigner's magic, as if they have had little contact with such things. Setting that aside, they inform him that they will take care of the rest of the construction. Takumi realizes that his new life has truly begun, and so far it doesn't seem bad at all. The next day, thanks to his skills in carpentry, forging, and woodworking, he single-handedly makes most of the furniture for his new home. However, the class he has gained still bothers him, so he wonders if he can change it. Exploring the menu, he discovers some selectable classes and chooses Alchemist. Examining the iron, copper, and silver ore he collected with Boban in the region, Takumi admires the main one, magical iron ore, a resource imbued with mana that can be transformed into ingots. Normally, this would require a large furnace to melt, but with his skills, Takumi can significantly expedite the process. According to him, alchemy consists of 5 techniques: decomposition, extraction, pulverization, synthesis, and recombination. After extracting the iron ore in this manner, the boy uses earth magic on it, producing the ingots. Later, Molly opens the door to Takumi's house to bring him dinner, but the boy had used so much mana that he looked like a spent user. Because of this, later on, Takumi gets scolded by Martha, Molly's mother, who teaches him to be more careful with such behavior. In turn, Banga, the girl's father, gives the alchemist a healing potion. After that day, Takumi starts to take it easier at work, but still, Martha and Molly come to check on the boy from time to time. Regardless, Takumi manages to level up to level 32 as an alchemist and 36 as a blacksmith. One day, while forging a blade, Boban asks the protagonist to increase the temperature with his magic, and with the help of the alchemist, the blacksmith is able to produce his best piece yet. That day, Takumi reaches level 40 as a blacksmith, although he really wanted to be an alchemist, a class that is falling behind still at level 33. Another day, Takumi goes to Banga and asks for some potions, as he plans to use ingredients to produce different potions. Banga agrees to the proposal, but asks the young man to sell some to him when he manages. Takumi then mixes crushed kittlek and water. With each stir in the pot, the color changes, reminding the boy of the experiments he used to do as a child. After finishing 2, he is not satisfied and sets out in search of new ingredients. At the beginning of his new expedition, the alchemist eats a plant and has a horrible reaction. Immediately, he uses the purification ability to heal himself, but although he survives, he collapses from exhaustion. Even though this is the quickest way for him to gain resistance and increase his light magic, he admits it's difficult. To make matters worse, the fortified giant boar charges at the boy. He reacts with his spear, but the beast's armor breaks the blade. Takumi tries all his magics, but none cause damage. Amidst the confusion, he ends up encountering a wounded venomous spider, which attacks the boar but is also thrown away. Unsure what to do, Takumi risks using the alchemist's decomposition magic on the boar, and the strategy ends up working. Even wounded, the boy goes to see how the spider is doing, as it seemed to try to help him. Because of this, the human heals the arachnid and gains the ability Tame, then tames the new partner and names her Key, because the pattern on her back looks like a cave leaf. Using her voice, the spider says she likes the name, and she evolves into an assassin spider and grows in size. Seeing that Takumi has returned to the village with the carcass of a fortified boar, the people are stunned and terrified by the spider he carries on his back. However, Takumi explains that he has tamed the arachnid, so the villagers prepare a feast to eat the boar. At night, during the celebration, Banga gives the animal materials for the leather armor Takumi requested and advises the boy to sell the leftovers in the city of Bolton. Amidst this, Banga and Bobon discuss how everything has improved since Takumi's arrival. Early the next morning somewhere, a woman watches intently through a window. Meanwhile, Nolan follows Takumi's steps and likes what he sees. Another goddess approaches and asks what Nolan expects of him, as in addition to giving the boy a special blessing, she sent him to the past a year before Sidonia activated the summoning spell. However, Nolan responds that she has no specific reason. The following day, Takumi was lecturing Keed for having woken up entangled in her web, not to mention she had covered the entire room with that type of silk. The spider apologized and explained that she felt very lonely, which is why she wanted to keep her master with her a little longer since he was always so busy. Upon hearing this, Takumi realized he had indeed been neglecting Keed, spending all of his time crafting potions and other items. Reflecting on this, he apologized as well and promised to take a break from work to spend some time with his friend. Overjoyed, the spider leaped onto the human just as Martha suddenly arrived with a meal and witnessed the odd scene. Takumi tried to explain that his pet wasn't trying to eat him, but Martha had already noticed the amount of spider silk in the room and saw potential in it. Not wanting to waste the material, she crafted some clothes from the silk, and her friends were amazed by the outcome. Watching this, Takumi hadn't realized spider silk was so incredible, and the women explained that it was a luxurious item highly sought after by nobles. Martha tried to communicate with Keed, requesting some more elastic silk, and the spider managed to understand and provided the material. Just as Takumi called his pet to play, it was her turn to say she was too busy, her expression full of resentment. Eventually, the young man backed off, happy that his friend was enjoying herself. Since he was free, he decided to return to his work. Looking around, he realized it had been almost a month since he arrived in the village, and he felt he would soon need to study alchemy in the big city. However, he didn't want to leave without making his mark on this place where everyone had been so kind to him. Later, Takumi went to Bobon and received his armor. Besides that, the blacksmith mentioned he needed to fix the soles and tips of the young man's boots as they weren't suitable for facing the forest monsters. Takumi argued that he was just a producer and didn't deal with such matters, but Boba knew very well that Takumi often wandered alone through the woods and wasn't exactly who he claimed to be. Just then, Banga arrived to see the boy's armor and mentioned that for his production work to evolve, Takumi needed to move to a city where the demand and supply of materials were greater. With this in mind, the man noted that merchants from Bolton were coming to the village next week, and he had arranged a ride for Takumi in their carriage. In other words, the protagonist was moving to Bolton. Moved, he thanked his friends who had supported him so much. Excited, Takumi met with Martha and saw that she was about to throw away the entrails of a horned rabbit that Banga had hunted. Although it was the tastiest part of the animal, if used as it was, there was a risk of disease or parasites. However, Takumi used his purification magic to solve the problem. Right away, Martha was impressed that the young man could use light magic and thanked him for his great help, but she warned him not to use such spells in front of others, as few people were capable of it, and those who could live off this rare magic. Martha said no one in Board Village would mind, but since Takumi was heading to the big city, he'd better be careful. Waiting for the Bolton merchants, Takumi used his week to give back to the village, working on its development and making it as safe and practical as possible, with a high wall and more sophisticated production equipment. As the days passed, Papek, the merchant, arrived in Board and was surprised to see the wall. After negotiating with the villagers, Takumi was ready to travel. Boban asked if the boy wasn't forgetting anything, and he remembered to hand over 100 healing potions he had produced for Banga in case they were needed by the villagers. Pepek was impressed with the substance and held the bottle up to the sun to admire its glow. At that moment, Martha and the other villagers came to bid Takumi farewell. Molly asked where Key was, and the pet's owner said she was sleeping. Banga and Bowman urged the boy to stay strong and take care, while Martha handed over a tunic that some villagers had personally produced for the Alchemist with the help of threads produced by Keed. Moved by so much affection, Takumi bowed to thank everyone for all they had given him. Soon, he boarded the carriage and left with tears in his eyes. After all, this was the first city where he had lived in Mildgard, and he came to consider it his homeland. During the journey, Pempek commented that Takumi was very loved by the inhabitants of Board. Heath, one of the travelers, couldn't hold back his tears at the beautiful scene he had witnessed. Then, everyone introduced themselves, starting with Heath himself. Next, Riel introduced herself and pointed out that the quiet bald man was Bogar. Pepek explained that these three formed a rank C group of adventurers known as the Lion's Fangs. Heath explained that they were guarding the caravan, although Rio was bored with how calm the environment was, so much so that she would love for some monster to appear. By the way, he commented that Takumi was holding his bag as if it contained something very important, and the boy revealed that inside was his pet assassin spider. Unaware of the danger, Rio peeked inside the bag to see the creature but ended up being attacked. Afterward, Keed clung to Bogar, who embraced the spider affectionately. Bet and Papek asked if Takumi had more of that healing potion, as he would love to buy it. As soon as the alchemist confirmed, the merchant abruptly stopped the carriage and looked shocked. The adventurers grabbed their weapons, thinking it might be a monster, and indeed, a group of goblins approached the carriage. The lion's fangs quickly left the carriage to do their job, and Rio, noticing that there were about 20 more of these monsters inside the forest, alerted her companions that she would lure these enemies by shooting arrows at them. Meanwhile, Heath and Bogar confronted the goblins in hand-to-hand combat. Two monsters surprised Papek and Takumi by circling the carriage, but not Rio, who killed the two with her bow. With the battle over, the archer announced that it was time to dissect the creatures and collect their magic stones. At night, Takumi reflected that the journey had proceeded without further problems. 3 days later, the caravan arrives in Bolton, in the kingdom of Barcula. Everything in that city feels totally new to our protagonist, since it's the first big town he's ever set foot in within Mildgard. Wasting no time, he heads straight to the Adventurers Guild alongside the 3 members of Lion's Fangs who need to report the success of their escort mission. Takumi himself has to register at the guild so he can stay in the city, and he also needs to list Keed as his pet. At the reception desk, he makes it clear he'd rather join some kind of alchemist's guild, but the attendant explains that such a guild doesn't exist. He also mentions that plenty of people sign up at the Adventurers Guild anyway, just to get an ID card. If Takumi doesn't mind staying at the lowest rank, his registration never expires and he can still accept one simple quest per month. In the end, Takumi decides to register with the Adventurers Guild and officially lists Keed as his pet. Next, the alchemist heads over to Papek's company to strike a deal for 100 potions with the owner. The businessman offers 10 silver coins for each basic healing and stamina potion and 50 for each mana potion. Takumi quickly does the math in his head and almost faints when he realizes that all of this adds up to around 7 million yen, roughly 270,000 rias. On top of that, Papek mentions he shaved the price down a bit because Takumi's still unknown in these parts. Honestly, Takumi thinks it's too good to be true and figures there must be some hidden reason why Papek would pay so much for someone he barely knows, even though he doesn't look like a swindler. By the way, Papek also brings up where Takumi plans to live. If Takumi's serious about working as a producer, he ought to have a house or workshop. Takumi immediately points out he's short on funds, but Papek insists on showing him a property for rent. So he calls Thomas, one of his employees, and asks him to escort the newcomer to his potential new home. Soon enough, Takumi is brought to an absolute mansion and completely loses his composure, never expecting to live somewhere like that. Thomas tells him the rent is 1 gold and 50 silver coins per month, which is way cheaper than Takumi imagined. He even jokes if someone died in this pigsty, and Thomas assures him that's not the case. Looking around, the alchemist notices there's a storage room he could repurpose as a workshop, and he figures he'll pay the rent with his soon-to-be potion money. Keed wakes up and asks where they are, so Takumi explains that this is their new home. When Thomas inquires whether the young man's made up his mind, Takumi decides to take the place. With that settled, they head out of the property, and Thomas mentions that they'll prepare everything for the move tomorrow. Suddenly, a foul smell catches Takumi's attention. Thomas explains that it's the city's sewer problem. The nobles can afford magic devices to deal with it in their mansions, but commoners aren't so lucky. Those purification devices have to be excavated from dungeons or ancient ruins, and they cost a fortune. Sometimes priests are hired to purify the sewage, but it's only a temporary measure. The next day, Takumi moves in and sets up his workshop. He leaves the outer wall repairs for later because there's something else he wants to take care of first. With that in mind, he mixes quartz into the clay he bought from Papek's company, then uses magic to shape it. Once it's dry, he applies heat and uses space-time magic to speed up the firing process. After a lot of work, his alchemy and light magic both level up, though he's left with hardly any mana, feeling like nothing but Batman's empty cape. Still, he manages what he set out to do. He's now got a top-notch toilet in his bathroom. In the middle of celebrating, he hears Papek shouting, so he rushes over to see what's going on. Turns out the merchant is covered in spider web. According to Keed, people usually love that kind of welcome, but Takumi insists only the kids back in his village thought it was fun. Papek, however, seems oddly comfortable with the web's texture. After freeing the businessman, Takumi apologizes for the trouble, but Papek waves it off. Then he asks to use the bathroom, only to be startled when he sees the toilet inside. Takumi explains that it's a magical toilet fitted with a device that decomposes waste through purification, cleaning the water and leaving just a tiny bit of inorganic residue. Impressed, Papek asks if the young man has a knack for light magic, but Takumi recalls Martha telling him to keep that under wraps, so he asks the merchant to keep it a secret. Papek promises and immediately orders 100 more of these toilets. Yet he also suggests Takumi get a contract with a slave because if he can use light magic, his talent is too valuable to leave unprotected. In other words, the slave would guard both the property and its owner, and would be bound to keep things confidential. After all, Takumi is rumored to be a chosen one of God, at least according to the Church of the Divine Light, which leads the Holy Empire of Sidonia. They'll snatch up anyone with an aptitude for light magic and profit off their healing magic, so they won't just sit around while he uses purification magic to help ordinary folks who can't afford it. Papek does have a few ideas to get enough support for producing these toilets, but it's crucial to keep Takumi's name out of the public eye. Even so, Takumi makes it clear he's against slavery and would rather handle everything himself. Suddenly, Takumi's guild card starts to glow. A notification says he's got 1 month from the time of registration to complete a quest at his level. Realizing he's got too much on his plate, he admits he really could use some help. Papek asks if Takumi has time to spare that day. Without missing a beat, the merchant leads Takumi to Mulan & Co., the most reputable slave market in Bolton. While Papek takes care of some business there, Takumi steps into the garden and meets a woman who immediately tells him to get lost before he can say a word. She doesn't know how the boy ended up there, but she makes it clear that this is no place for children. Meanwhile, the company owner introduces herself to Papek as Mulan. Papek explains that Takumi is looking for a servant, although he is hesitant to enter into such a contract. According to Takumi, having a servant was something that simply didn't exist where he came from. Mulan mentions that it is true that once a contract is signed between the servant and the master, it binds him to their service. However, at least in the kingdom of Barkula, servants' rights are protected, including the provision of food, clothing, and shelter, and it is forbidden to force the servant to perform actions not described in the contract. For their part, servants are prohibited from sharing information about their master. This is definitely different from what Takumi believed, and it helps him change his mind. Mulan then explains the common types of contracts. Those who became servants due to debts have a contract that lasts until the debt is paid. Typically, these are criminals. Prisoners of war, on the other hand, submit to this to secure a place to live. Moreover, there are contracts with people who were captured and illegally forced into servitude, which is the most common case. In Papek's opinion, it would be more interesting for Takumi to have one of the war prisoners who cannot be released without their master's permission because he is a producer with skills and talents others cannot imitate. Takumi adds that he would like to focus on his work as much as possible, but he also has missions from the Adventurers Guild and currently cannot handle day-to-day tasks. In other words, he needs someone to manage the tasks of his mansion. Now the main point is that there are secrets involving Takumi's abilities, so he needs to ensure there will be no problems regarding this. The boy also imagines he will venture into dangerous places to find materials and resources for his production, so it would be important if the servant had combat experience to accompany the expeditions. Following the client's intentions, Mulan imagines he needs 2 servants, so she brings young Maria to the meeting room, a girl who was kidnapped by bandits when she was little and no longer has any family. She has been trained to read, write, calculate, and perform household tasks. Awkward in front of the girl, Takumi explains that his house has a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen on the first floor, while the second floor has 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. Knowing this, Takumi asks if Maria can handle the job. Without hesitation, she confirms that she can, but asks why the contractor seems so troubled. In fact, Takumi doesn't understand how such a beautiful person has not yet been chosen by any master, and when he hears this, Maria is visibly embarrassed and explains that she can only perform domestic tasks and could not join the master on adventures. Desperate, Takumi tries to clarify that he meant no harm and doesn't expect that from her, so Mulan wishes to proceed with the contract once the two have understood each other. Now, as for the servant with combat experience that the client is looking for, the businesswoman doesn't have any war servants available at the moment. Maria argues that they have Sophia, but Mulan makes it clear that the girl should not interfere in this matter and sends her back to the room to pack her bag. After Maria leaves, Takumi asks about Sophia, and Mulan reveals that she has problems but does not go into details, leaving Takumi curious. Eventually, the businesswoman promises to contact him when she has a candidate who fits what the boy needs, but the client, guided by his intuition skill, insists on meeting Sophia. Thus, Mulan takes the young man to the elf's room and explains that she was captured in the war between the kingdoms of Triuria and Yugur about 50 years ago. The kingdom of Yugur was a nation of elves. For various reasons, Sophia never signed a contract with anyone, with a severe injury on her left ear and an impediment in her right hand and left leg, in addition to her spiritual elemental magic, unique to elves, being sealed. For this reason, Mulan believes that Sophia was placed under some kind of curse. Nevertheless, such flaws are fatal for a fighter. After hearing every detail, Takumi asks to speak with the elf, and Mulan allows it, much to Sophia's own surprise, as she visibly didn't want to talk to the human boy. Either way, the company owner leaves the room, then Takumi introduces himself. Without saying his name, Sophia makes it clear she won't be useful to him. But Takumi holds the woman's face to see her status and discovers she is extremely powerful, hitting level 64, although her problem with debilitated limbs lowers her status by 100, and the exorcism curse she suffers from prevents her from using her mana. Still, Takumi imagines he might find a way to break this curse and use such a skilled figure in his expeditions. At that moment, Mulan enters the room looking for an answer, and Takumi confirms he wants a contract with Sophia Sylphid because he feels he can solve her problems. Mulan reminds him that these are issues that have gone unresolved for over 50 years, but the boy confirms without hesitation. With that, the businesswoman bursts out laughing and assures the elf to the client. Sophia grumbles because of the decision, then Takumi asks her to be honest and say if she doesn't want to go with him. However, even clenching her fists in anger, Sophia responds that it is not necessary to confirm the desires of a mere servant. Be that as it may, the contract is now firmly established between both parties, and Maria thanks Takumi for hiring Sophia along with her. Then Mulan casts a spell as proof of the contract, concluding the entire process definitively. Maria promises to work hard to be kept as a servant of Takumi for many years, and even Sophia lowers her guard a bit and thanks the master for having been received. Also because of this, Mulan thinks she has finally found a good master for the two. Right after Takumi brings them home, as soon as he opens the front door, he's knocked to the ground by Keed. Immediately, Sophia instructs Maria to stay away from the monster, while the homeowner tries to explain that this is his pet and introduces everyone. Although she understands, Sophia is puzzled by the master having a deadly spider as a pet. Then Takumi shows the elf a very spacious room and informs her that the one next door will be for Maria. The maids are shocked to have individual rooms, and Sophia even refuses at first, thinking it's too luxurious. But Takumi insists there are enough rooms for everyone to use. Additionally, the mansion features a bathtub that everyone can use. Sophia thinks the master should use it first to avoid bathing and use water, but he explains that the tub has a magical device that keeps everything clean. In the next scene, the servants try out the bath, and Maria is quite happy with the reality she has found. By the way, she mentions she thought Mulan would never let them go. After all, she never made a contract with anyone, no matter how much money was offered. However, she recognized Takumi as a good master. Still, Sophia had a look at the contract, and details like the master's birthplace and lineage were blank. Because of this, the elf suspects the boy might be hiding something. Later, the pair is surprised by dinner ready on the table. Although it seems like a good thing, Maria despairs, thinking she's useless since that was her job. Takumi explains that he just made dinner today, and tomorrow she will take over the kitchen, so she asks to at least wash the dishes. After calming the girl down, Takumi invites everyone to the meal, and Sophia remarks that it's normal for the master to eat separately from the servants, but he insists he doesn't want things to be that way. Moreover, he would love it if they didn't call him master and instead used his name. The next day, Takumi goes to the Papek business company and receives a magical parcel with the items he ordered. Then he was walking down the street and noticed a church he had never seen before, so he enters it to thank Goddess Nolan for all the blessings that have elevated his life at such a gratifying level. However, during his prayer, he wants to know why the goddess told him to be wary of the Holy Empire of Sidonia, since they control religion in this country. To answer his question, Nolan personally takes the human to the sky and explains that she has nothing to do with Sidonia and its Church of Divine Light. In fact, there are two religions in this world: the Church of Creation, which has always worshipped Nolan from the beginning, and the Church of Divine Light, which was created later and worships a non-existent god. After founding this church, the Holy Empire of Sidonia used force to spread its influence, but Nolan did not interfere to preserve human beings' freedom of action. However, Sidonia managed to activate the spell of summoning from another world, leading to the accident that resulted in summoning Iruma Takumi. It was for this reason that Nolan bestowed her blessing on this human. By the way, she warns that the apology blessing will last forever, but as the boy expands in this world, the part of the blessing that helped him grow and meet good people will fade. That is, everything that was going well until now may turn upside down. Upon learning this, Takumi better understands why he has met so many good people so far, and that from now on, everything depends solely on him. A year later, in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, a leader seated on his throne asks a subordinate how the summoned heroes are doing. The response is that the three are training with Homer and Packard. Although they were reluctant as soon as they were summoned, Elizabeth managed to convince them to serve the Empire. Speaking of them, Akira and Yamato were training their sword skills, and the demand for them to give their best was immense. In the middle of a mistake by Yamato, a man arrives and asks if that is all he has, and this phrase triggers a memory of the young man being defeated in a fight by Ippen. Since then, everyone thought Yamato was lost, but to not repeat the failure, the boy raises his sword again and returns to the fight. Meanwhile, Akane is also called for training, but she refuses because she hates violence. At this moment, Elizabeth arrives and explains that this is not violence but the strength necessary to save this world, while Akira promises to protect his comrade come what may. The princess emphasizes that Akane's companions are very inspiring, but all the girl feels is repulsion for Elizabeth because to this day she is certain that this woman is dangerous. Meanwhile, Takumi has just arrived home and as always is knocked down by his pet spider. Maria and Sophia rush to help the master pick up his things from the floor, but just as the elf was about to grab the magical parcel, the boy tosses it straight into his item box to prevent the maid from touching it, and this generates even more doubts in her mind. Because of this, she goes to Takumi's workshop to spy on him and sees him acting bizarrely and even cutting his own arm with a knife dipped in a strange substance. To make matters worse, he speaks alone saying Maria is terrible, and that was the last straw for Sophia to burst into the workshop and knock Takumi down, asking what he plans to do with Maria. However, the elf faints in the middle of this, so Takumi checks her status and discovers she has exhaustion and a wound on her left hand. Immediately, he heals the wound and levels up with his light magic. Later, he puts Sophia to rest in a bed, and Maria explains that the curse makes the elf tired from time to time. Thus, Takumi combines the dissipate and extra heal magics, thereby recovering Sophia's ear. With this, the alchemist believes the elf can fight as before. Later, Sophia wakes up and urges Maria to flee from Takumi as quickly as possible, but the younger girl explains that the master is a good person and has cured her of the curse. At this, the elf notices that the mana circulation has returned to her body. Because of this, she demands an explanation from her boss, who then reveals that he needed one more level of light magic to break the curse, and the purple liquid in that bottle comes from the poisonous Nenum herb, which he had ordered from Papek. By injuring himself and then healing, he managed to level up enough to learn extra heal. Sophia asks why he called Maria terrible, and he explains that she had mixed up his medicinal plants and accidentally thrown them away. Acknowledging Takumi's deed, the maid then swears loyalty to her master for the rest of her life. The next day, Takumi heads to a large local library, but is frustrated to find only 4 alchemy books there. Apparently, alchemy is on the decline, and he suspects it's because it relies on the script of an ancient magical civilization, which greatly limits access to proper translations. Fortunately, since his reincarnation, Takumi can understand all languages of this world, likely due to the blessing of Nolan. As soon as he gets home, Maria comments that she'll never forget the cutest scene she's ever witnessed. Sophia, on her knees before the boy as if a knight vowing to defend a princess forever. Cade fully agrees on the beauty of this drama, while Takumi is not too pleased to be cast as the princess in the story. Later, the alchemist finishes producing the toilet seats he had promised to Papek, then considers taking a break from crafting. Maria asks if he's going to produce something else, so he shares that he will, but he's also thinking about taking an aimless trip. He wants to try finding unique materials and meals, see tourist spots, and explore some ruins. The plan is to take Sophia as a bodyguard, while Maria stays home to manage everything. Cade asks about her role in the trip, so the owner reminds her that she's a pet, thus she goes along. Seeing she would be left alone, Maria begs to join her friends, but the master reminds that he needs someone to handle the household tasks. In response, the girl dramatically tries to persuade him, arguing that being alone in that mansion would be like being an isolated toilet in a scorching desert or even less significant. Takumi reflects that this girl always makes toilet analogies, but aside from that, it really is concerning to leave her alone in the house, especially with that look of needy pleading. So trying to find something to convince him to change his mind, the alchemist himself uses his evaluation magic and checks Maria's status. To his surprise, she has attributes with interesting potential as a warrior, which sways the boy's decision. Sophia reinforces her friend's request, saying she could teach them both to fight on this trip, and Takumi finally gives in, allowing the younger maid to join them. With that settled, it's time to produce the armaments for the trip. Takumi asks what kind of weapon Sophia would want, and she opts for a long sword and a 2.5-meter spear, along with a bow and 2 knives. Somewhat startled by the elf's demands, the alchemist asks if she also wants a shield, so she takes the opportunity to request a buckler, which is a smaller, lighter shield. Afterward, the young man poses the same question to the other maid, and since she was trained in the use of short blades at the Mulin Company, a dagger or short sword would be good. However, Sophia warns that her friend's attack power might suffer if she only carries those, so she offers to teach the girl how to use a spear. At night, the protagonist sets aside some magical steel ingots to produce the equipment. In this world, metals need to be more than just hard, otherwise they're useless. The next day, spear training begins and Sophia asks Maria to repeat some attack moves, but this time with her lumber lowered. As the instructor demonstrates the move, the human is amazed by the sound produced by the strike. Meanwhile, Takumi continues working on the armaments and is about to finalize the spear blades after consuming an absurd amount of mana with so much work, which at least leveled up several of his skills and classes. The young man adds a wing pattern to Sophia's weapon and a flame pattern to Maria's. Now he applies the attack enhancement and self-repair enchantments to both. Next, he thinks about what to do with Maria's knives. Considering that she's a combat maid, it would be cool to have these knives sheathed on her thigh. Suddenly, even though she's far away, Maria feels a strange chill on her thigh and feels the need to cover her body even though she was already covered. Returning to the brilliant alchemist and blacksmith, he would need to measure both girls to know the exact size of their armor, but he doesn't dare ask this personally, so he finds an unusual solution to this problem: constructing dolls of the two. Although it's somewhat peculiar, the young man feels more comfortable working this way than having to involve the two in the process. Once that's done, he considers it would be interesting to use the shell and leather of the fortified giant boar as material, along with fabric made from Cade's threads. For the design, the clever guy decides to exercise his right as master to produce armor that pleases his taste. Soon after all the manufacturing, there stand Maria and Sophia in their respective armors. Maria finds hers so perfect she can hardly believe it's real, and the elf emphasizes that the garment suited her as soon as she put it on. She just doesn't understand how Takumi was able to produce something so fitting to their size. Cade was about to rat out that the guy used dolls, so the boy changes the subject and emphasizes that the defense must be very good too because of the spider web used in the making. Then he shows the weapons to the two, being Sophia's sword and Maria's knives. Lastly, he gives each a mithril magic ring, which will serve as a focus for casting spells. Sophia says that must have used a lot of mana to make, but the blacksmith explains that he also trains when producing these items, so it's advantageous for him either way, especially since it was thanks to this that he acquired ice and lightning magic. Next, they head to the Adventurers Guild to register the maids as adventurers. Without delay, they receive their rank A identity cards, and Takumi takes the opportunity to register the trio as a group before the journey, planning to pick up some rank G and A missions. Sophia reminds him that he won't earn any experience points with such low-level missions, but his goal isn't to level up. In the midst of this, a group of tough-looking men approaches to hassle the girls, telling them they should ditch this wimp and explore the world with real men like them. Being all rank D, they're sure they can take much better care of them than some anemic kid with old lady hair. Not to be outdone, Takumi steps forward and faces the tough guys who can hardly believe that such a kid is trying to stand up to them. Internally, Takumi is terrified, but he maintains his cool, calculated exterior to not admit that he's nearly messing his pants. Feeling confident, a big guy punches the boy in the head, but Takumi stiffens his body, making it seem like the opponent punched a concrete wall. At that moment, a man arrives to scold the troublemakers and asks if the adventurer's scraped arm was the work of the little guy there. Takumi scratches his face and chokes on his words, while Maria tries to explain that the poor guy did nothing. The man isn't convinced by this story, so Hans, who attended to the group, defends Takumi, saying it was the big guys who started the provocation. The employee then informs them that this man is Barak, the master of the local guild. Barak orders the healing of the fool who punched his colleague's forehead, while telling the kid who took the blow to follow him. In the master's office, Takumi is asked about what exactly happened, but he remains stuck in a freeze and can't spit it out. The receptionist detected traces of mana in the fight, so he asks if it involved the use of magic. Takumi is impressed by the guy's magic sensing skill, but explains that no spell was cast. In fact, he took some coal from the item box, synthesized it into diamond, and covered his upper body with it. With that said, Hans understands why Takumi first came to the guild looking for an alchemist's guild. Barak asks if the two girls alongside are part of the boys' group, and they agree. Stating that they are very beautiful women, the clerk suggests that the master should upgrade their group to rank D right away, and the man agrees that's the best thing to do, as it will keep less jerks like those trying to approach them. Takumi is confused as he had just registered these people in the guild, and they are already wanting to promote them out of nowhere. It even seems like he's the protagonist of an anime. Since the alchemist doesn't want an easy game, the employee suggests that the group take on some missions that he will personally set aside to help them climb quickly, and the three agree to the idea. Without delay, Hans prepares 3 missions for the team, one to exterminate goblins, another to finish off kobolds, and the last to collect marrow herbs. On the first mission, Keed alerts the master that there are 4 goblins lurking in the forest, so Sophia asks for the coordinates to eliminate the first 2 by surprise. The last ones attack the group of humans directly, and Takumi reflects that the missions he took are all rank G or free classification, and the reward was 5 or 6 silver coins, which isn't that low. The thing is, they're finding way more goblins and kobolds than they needed. Sophia thinks there might be some camp of these monsters nearby, usually commanded by a rank C goblin general. Takumi thinks they should head home to avoid a beating, but Sophia and Maria are sure they can invade this enemy territory. Meanwhile, Keed warns that she's about to evolve, so the master sends her into a portal for her to rest a bit. Sophia asks if this was a mobile dimension, and Takumi awkwardly replies that he learned to use it when his space-time magic reached level 3. Then they enter the goblins' camp, and the elf estimates there are between 300 and 400 goblins. Takumi freaks out even more and questions if it's really necessary for them to face all these people, but Sophia is sure they can reduce a large part of these numbers with long-range magic. With that said, they cast spells using the rings and launch them at the horde, causing absolute devastation. However, it's not over yet, as this is when the enemy's general appears along with the Goblin Knight, both of superior species. Finally, since he's there, Takumi dives into the monsters, even though he was scared to death, and relies on his magic to help in the fight. Hours later, the group returns to the guild exhausted after having completed all the missions passed in half a day. Not believing this, Hans asks the people to have a word with the guild master. In the meantime, Barak mentions that he needs an extermination squad with several members above rank D when suddenly, Cade emerges from the portal punching the master's bald head and showing off her evolution. Sophia and Takumi don't know what to think about this, but Maria loves the new phase of the spider, as does Cade, who always wanted to chat with the redhead and now can do that. Finally, before separating their reward, Hans announces that Takumi has moved up to rank E, while the girls in the group have moved to rank F. Later at home, Maria asks the master for some fabric scraps to make underwear for her and Sophia. Takumi thinks it would be difficult to produce these garments from scraps, but the girl makes a drawing to show that it's not as complicated as one might think. Then Takumi draws a sketch of much shorter underwear, thinking that was the norm, and although he was embarrassed, Maria asks him to make them in that style. In the midst of this, Keed informs them that Pepek has arrived, but since he fainted as soon as he set eyes on the mutant spider, she threw him in the living room to get some air. Later, when he recovers, the businessman informs them that Lord Bolton, Marcus Godwin, wants to meet the Alchemist to talk about the device with purification magic. Without delay, they head to the big city, and Lord Bolton expresses his amazement at the effectiveness of the device for preventing plagues and feels a deep debt to the young man, bowing before him. Takumi is embarrassed to see a leader of such stature bow, but Godwin is comfortable doing this as often as necessary if it will improve his domain. Moreover, Takumi had managed to defeat a goblin camp, something even Bolton's own knights had failed to do. For this reason, the Lord asks Takumi to prioritize his safety from now on, as it would be a tremendous loss to society if anything bad happened to the Alchemist. Therefore, he must not let his guard down, especially when the Sacred Empire of Sidonia comes after him. A few days after this trip, the boy is exhausted while Keed finishes the undergarments he had ordered. He goes to deliver the pieces to the girls, who discover that the poor guy spent 3 days in the workshop producing these clothes. They hurry to try them on, and as Takumi thinks they will strip right there, he dashes out as quickly as he can to his room. Upon arriving, he thinks he's going mad, all because Nolan's blessing is coming to an end. Out of his mind, the kid sees the image of his inner devil, telling him that, in fact, he feels this way because he wanted to try on the panties and brag, prompting Takumi to let out a scream of horror. The next day, the alchemist excitedly unveils his latest creation, the refrigerator. Cade opens the door and marvels at the cool breeze, while the master explains that it keeps food cold to prevent spoilage. With that said, the 3 women in the house were enjoying the cool air from the refrigerators, so the developer asked them to avoid leaving the door open. During the creation process, Takumi synthesized iron, chromium, and nickel into an alloy. Then he used stainless steel, shaped it into a rectangle, and placed a cooling enchantment on it. Maria thanks him for the incredible discovery because now she can cook with fresh ingredients at any time. Takumi asks which color she prefers, so the maid turns to her friend Sophia, as she finds it hard to choose between the 3. Sophia says she prefers blue, so Takumi leaves that refrigerator with the girls and mentions he'll take the rest to Pepek. Later, he plans to upgrade the household's equipment inspired by an idea after a battle with General Goblin. Considering the armors are made of magical steel, he wanted to enhance their durability using mithril and adamantium. Takumi takes this idea to Hans, who isn't sure if there's a blacksmith in Bolton capable of handling such rare materials, but he assures he'll find someone capable in the dwarf kingdom of Namstal. In any case, the receptionist will provide a list of blacksmiths living in Bolton before the boy departs. And considering Takumi is an alchemist, it would be a process that consumes a lot of mana. But Hans mentions he could synthesize these materials, though it's faster to obtain them through mining. According to the attendant, there is a town called Horaz, northwest of the kingdom of Barkula, with a mine where the alchemist could extract mithril and adamantium. The problem is he won't be able to enter unless he's a member of the Blacksmiths Guild. However, there's a loophole. If he takes on a mission to defeat the monsters that appear in this mine, he would get the permission to extract the materials while on guild service. Meanwhile, Barak suddenly appears beside Takumi and announces that he has good news, as most adventurers are hunting black buffaloes at this time of year. This means there are few people collecting Trent wood, hence Bolton is running low on this resource, which brings many problems to the city. By the way, he mentions that Trents live in the Death Forest, along the road to Horaz. If Takumi used space-time magic, he could transport the Trents to Bolton without having to return. Having accepted the mission, the guild master informs him that a blacksmith is looking for a bodyguard to Horaz. If Takumi also accepts this mission, he will be promoted to rank D, and Maria and Sophia will advance to E. The young alchemist argues that he has never participated in escort missions before, so he asks where the 3 members of Lion Fangs are. Barak informs that they are on a different mission, and Takumi finds himself with no choice but to ask how long it takes to reach Horaz. Hans informs that it takes 7 days by horse-drawn carriage or 4 days by one pulled by a monster horse, but unfortunately, the guild only has regular horses available. At that moment, Riel enters the room and apologizes for using a monster horse. Surprised by the presence of the archer from Lion Fangs, Hans asks if they have already accomplished their goals so soon, and Riel responds that they haven't. They killed a black buffalo on the way, so he brought it back before it could spoil. By the way, he complains that superior species keep appearing one after the other, which greatly complicates the escort, but Barak quickly replies that adventurers are well paid for that reason. With a stern face, Riel informs that he will return in the morning to meet with the other members of the group. Then Takumi invites him to come to his house tonight to rest his body in the bathtub. Excited about the idea, the archer decides to accompany his friend until he returns home. Later, Takumi visits Papek, who agrees to lend a carriage with monster horses from the company, but in return, asks Takumi to wholesale some ores he extracts on the mission. Additionally, of course, it would be great if the alchemist produced more of those refrigerators. At the protagonist's house, Sophia notices that he's taking too long to return and wonders if something happened while she was away. Thinking about it, the elf thinks she should have gone with him. At night, on the way home, Takumi and Riel regret not finding any blacksmith who could handle mithril. They remember that of all those they visited from the list, one was absent. Suddenly, Riel senses immense hostility coming their way. When a hooded figure emerges from the forest, he grabs Takumi and runs with him, claiming they don't have enough equipment to face this adversary. However, the hooded figure was fast enough to catch up with the duo and lands a kick that knocks down the archer from Lion Fangs. At this, Sophia removes the hood and challenges the man about how he dares to touch her master. But either way, the elf assures she will deal with this troublemaker now with her sword. Takumi steps in front of the blow as quickly as possible and explains the situation. After learning everything, Sophia asks for forgiveness for attacking one of the master's friends, but the master himself apologizes for not having notified that he would arrive late. After that, Riel arrives at the alchemist's house and is amazed to see what Keed has become, commenting that she has turned all cute, but the spider makes it clear she doesn't like this guy, which emotionally shakes him. On his knees, the archer confesses it must be nice to be surrounded by beautiful girls like these, and that Heath and Bogar are married, meaning he's the only team member who's still single. Then Takumi informs that they are not his girlfriends, so Riel takes the opportunity to shine brightly and asks Sophia what she thinks of him. The elf responds that her heart and body already belong to Takumi, so the archer asks the same thing to Maria. The girl basically responds the same, then Takumi advises the guy to cry in the shower to hide it. As suggested, Riel enjoys the water with tears on his face. In the room, Sophia agrees to the hunt for the trance, as does Cade. Consequently, the leader decides that they will depart in 3 days, and by then, they will need more equipment. Sometime later, Riel says goodbye and leaves. Then Takumi takes the opportunity to work on the weapons. First, he selects a mana-draining sword made of tungsten carbide. Although it's a good weapon, it's too large to be practical. Moreover, Takumi had great difficulty handling his bow through alchemy, but his efforts paid off when, after nearly depleting all his mana, he managed to split the material into 2 smaller, lighter blades, maintaining the original power of the product. 3 days later, Takumi arrives at the north gate of Bolton and thanks Papek for the carriage. Inside was Gambo, the dwarf blacksmith who needs to be escorted to the city of Koraz. At the beginning of the journey, Keed praises how Maria handles the horses, and the human shares that she once took care of one named Furious God back at the Mulan Company. Meanwhile, Hans passes on to the guild master information received from the Horrors branch. They say the monsters of the Death Forest are more active, so all they can do is hope Takumi doesn't encounter any superior beings on his way. At Paypet Company, a noble tells the businessman that His Majesty greatly appreciated the bathroom and would like more of those implemented in the royal capital as well. Moreover, Bolton's sewage problem is being resolved to the extent that the news has spread to the royal capital, but the noble regrets that it might have spread too far, as it reached the sacred empire of Sidonia, so they might react at any moment. Months after Takumi's gift in Sidonia's castle, Akira and Yamato train hard as always to meet the expectations placed on their shoulders. While striking with his sword, Yamato recalled holding the title of judo champion at a national high school competition. Meanwhile, Akane couldn't take her eyes off the mysterious Elizabeth, who watched the training with her usual peculiar expression. Returning to Takumi after reaching a more isolated and safe region, he sets up a magical barrier to protect his escort and heads out to hunt the trance. On the way, he asks Sophia if there's a way to differentiate normal trees from trance, and she explains that it's possible to detect the mana flowing through their bodies. For example, she asks the group to focus on a specific tree and explains that it's the type of monster they are looking for. Without hesitation, Takumi attacks the target, which reacts by thrusting its roots from the ground to block his advance. After dodging the counterattack, the alchemist uses an axe to fell the tree and ends the fight quicker than he imagined it would be. However, Sophia informs him that the battle has just begun because they are completely surrounded by more trance. Due to the large number of enemies, the group resorts to magic to handle them all at once. As the fight continues, the team bravely holds their ground until an elder tree appears on the battlefield. The four combatants focus on this target and knock down several of the tree's roots, but it manages to regenerate in time and remains in the contest. Sophia suggests they focus on the tree's main body instead of the roots, so she asks Takumi to wrap his sword in fire magic. When he does, Sophia cuts several roots at once to clear a path for the alchemist, who leaps towards the body of the tree and plunges his sword into its left eye, declaring victory. At that moment, he finds a fruit dropped by the enemy, and Sophia tells him it's a miracle apple, a rare item that's very hard to eat. Excited about the fruit, Maria and Keed come over and suggest ideas for how to consume the apples. For example, Maria wants to make a pie. After successfully hunting the trance, the group arrives in the city of Horas the following day and hitches a ride to the local adventurers guild. There, Gambo suggests that the leader accept a mission to exterminate iron moles, as these monsters feed on the minerals in the mine. Takumi agrees to the task, and they immediately go and mine the resources they find. Between swings of his pickaxe, he extracts a piece of mithril ore and soon after finds adamantite nearby. However, the group feels the arrival of an iron mole as the entire mine starts to shake. When the creature appears, everyone must react quickly. Takumi activates his light magic, stunning the creature, which makes it easier for Sophia to deliver the final blow. Kate asks what her master did, and he explains that since moles live underground, they probably aren't big fans of light. For some reason, everyone is impressed with how easily the creature was defeated, to the point where Sophia questions if it was even possible to win so effortlessly. Confused by the group's reaction, Takumi asks back if everyone really wanted such an intense battle. Maria in turn shouts that she did nothing to help and feels useless, like a mole that digs to the deepest depths and never comes out again. Regardless, the group manages to extract a large amount of ore without further issues and returns to Bolton safely. The next day, Takumi goes to Gambo's workshop to learn how to forge mithril and adamantite. Over the following days, he works hard to handle these materials, which are more complicated than magical steel. After mastering the technique, the alchemist produces armors using these valuable resources and incorporates elements that match the magic of the companions who will use them. For example, he keeps for himself the thunder armor, which enhances his agility enhancement ability and grants him enviable speed, but he needs to learn to control it before he cracks his skull on some random wall. Moreover, Takumi forges for Sophia the Storm the Wind Lance, while Maria receives a fire lance named Explosion. Swearing to always protect her master with her life, Sophia asks if it's possible to have a strong and resistant shield. However, Takumi prefers that she prioritize her own safety instead of always putting him first. Meanwhile, in the heavens, Goddess Nolan watches over the journey of her protege but discovers that the group will soon face great dangers as their adventure continues. A year later, at Sidonia's castle, the heroes present themselves to the king, ready to set off for the kingdom of Samandor to fight for the peace of this world. Thus, His Majesty requests Annette's blessing for the warrior's departure. Back with Takumi, he works through the night crafting the shield Sophia requested and ends up exhausted at his workbench. Watching the boy's effort through the window, the elf feels bad for his condition and wishes there were someone to help the alchemist in his workshop. In the kingdom of Barcula, the king receives a letter from Sidonia stating that they have heard of the purification magic and wish to take measures about it as soon as a messenger arrives in the coming days. Realizing the hidden threat in those words, the king of Barcula crumples the letter and vows to not take this lightly. In the following days, a messenger from Sidonia approached the king of Barcula about the magical items used to purify his sewage, as the Church of Divine Light had denounced this practice to the Pope of the Sacred Empire of Sidonia. After all, they claim that light magic is a divine gift bestowed only upon the Church of Divine Light, meaning they want the patent for the purification magic circle to be handed over to them. Listening with disdain, the king of Barcula retorted that if this power is indeed a gift from their god, then the church should be able to create the magic circle themselves. Aggravated, the messenger added that according to the Pope, using the sacred purification magic on a bathroom item is unforgivable. Nevertheless, the king of Barcula refused to comply, prompting the messenger to threaten the withdrawal of all priests from the Church of Divine Light residing in Barcula. Calmly, the king stood and declared they could remove them, as it would not bother him in the slightest. In time, Takumi learned of this situation and wondered if it was wise to confront the church this way. However, Papek remained completely unbothered, explaining that there was another religion in the kingdom besides the Church of Divine Light, the Church of Creation, which worships the goddess Nolan. Curious, Takumi asked which god the Church of Divine Light worships, and the businessman believed it to be Anat. Setting that aside, he mentioned that the kingdom of Barcula upholds religious freedom, hence it has many followers of the old Church of Creation. The priests from the Church of Creation administer recovery magic almost as a charity act, whereas the priests from the Church of Divine Light are paid fortunes to do the same. Since the topic was broached, Papek confessed he had a favor to ask. Alongside Marquis Godwin, they had shown the king the vessels with purification magic, and now His Majesty wanted to meet the alchemist personally. Papek made it clear that the king would be quite upset if the boy declined the invitation, and seeing Takumi hesitate, the businessman clasped his hands in prayer and essentially begged Takumi to accept. Thus, Takumi returned home that night to announce he was heading to the royal capital Bakulatos and requested the company of his maids, who were excited to be part of this important journey, their first time in such a significant and renowned place. Takumi warned they would depart in a week, and during this interval, he needed to prepare various things. Maria inquired about the travel time to the capital, and he informed her that it takes 7 days by horse-drawn carriage. With this, the girl committed to preparing enough food for the long journey, and Takumi took the opportunity to mention he had thought of making new cloaks for her and Sophia. Thus, he had asked Papek to obtain dark elemental magic stones for him, as he could enchant them with perception blocking. This, in addition to being useful in battle, would allow the two to walk through the city without risk of being approached by peculiar individuals. The next day, at a street fair, Maria told Sophia that Master Takumi undervalues himself greatly, and the elf agreed, noting the young man's good looks and talent as a producer and alchemist. Seeing the elf was all praises for the master, Maria approached with a suspicious look. Sophia made an excuse to leave as soon as possible, but it didn't change Maria's certainty that the elf was in love with Takumi. Meanwhile, Takumi went to the chapel to meet with Nolan. He wanted to know if Anat, the goddess of the Church of Divine Light, was much different from Nolan. For her part, Nolan stated that she is the only goddess that exists, but that Takumi would learn what Anat means in due time. Now, what irritated her was the man's interest in this false goddess. Takumi explained that lately the sacred empire of Sidonia had been drawing closer to him, and remembering that some of Nolan's blessings might be undone depending on his actions, he suspected this was what attracted Sidonia's attention. Nolan responded that it wasn't the case, since Sidonia was the reason why Takumi was in Midgard to begin with. In other words, this went well beyond the power level of a blessing. If so, Takumi questioned what happened with the heroes summoned by Sidonia, and the goddess admitted that she had tampered with time when she sent Takumi there, sending him a year before the heroes were summoned. In other words, they would only be called in a few months. The young man was eager to understand all this, but the goddess declared that time was up and sent the human back on the spot. Awakening in the chapel, Takumi disliked that the goddess had dodged his question, but since he didn't plan to meet the heroes, perhaps the matter wasn't so significant after all. And speaking of them, in the sacred empire of Sidonia, 10 months before Takumi's current time, the heroes were advancing with their intense training. Returning to the present, Takumi gifted his companions with cloaks, and they were delighted. The young man got too excited and remarked how beautiful the two looked in these outfits, and as soon as Maria noticed that he had crossed a line, he clasped his hands to his head in despair. He then showed the girls that he would make a special carriage for this trip, as thinking long-term, it was better to invest in one they would own rather than always having to rent or borrow. Now, the only issue was the monster horse that would pull the cart, as they were far more effective than normal horses. Apparently, the way to go was to borrow one from the guild. Hearing this, Maria laughed and asked if the master knew why Bolton was called the City of Adventurers. The young man admitted he had no idea, so the maid knelt once again in embarrassment, presuming the master knew something he did not. Nevertheless, she didn't give up and explained that Bolton is so named because various places nearby are inhabited by monsters, such as the Death Forest. Among these monsters there are unicorns, purebred horses, and griffins even stronger and faster than the monster horses. Knowing this, the group sets off the Forest of Death, and Takumi becomes curious to know if, since the dragon horse is much faster than the monster horse, they are related to dragons. Maria explains that they aren't, it's just that their appearances are similar. Sophia adds that the difference between them and regular horses is the rhinoceros-like horn and the fact that their bodies are covered in scales like dragons. In the midst of the conversation, a wild wolf suddenly appears and charges at the group. Sophia reaches for her sheathed sword, but the wolf passes right by them. Takumi thinks this is thanks to the perception block of their cloaks, which fool the wolf's nose. Despite this, Sophia removes her cloak and says it's better for them to fight to train as well, something Takumi isn't too keen on hearing. As the journey continues, the elf confronts a giant boar and ends it with a single blow. Maria is thrilled to have much more meat to prepare for the journey's meals until the team notices a dead Trent. Needing Trent wood for the carriage, Takumi thinks today is his lucky day as he was about to buy some from Papek, but with this amount he can build the entire carriage. Meanwhile, as the team members extract resources from the area, Kate gets bored and wanders alone through the territory until she finds a wounded dragon mare on the ground. The spider approaches to offer help, but the mare attacks by firing a beam from its horn. This reminds Kate of when she was rescued by Takumi, so she tells the mare that she has an incredible master who will heal her wounds. At that moment, two giant ants appear, the culprits behind the mare's injuries. Without delay, Kate ties the two up with her web, and the mare finishes them off with her beam. However, a real anthill surrounds them. Kate sets up a web barrier, but the ants begin to devour the fabric to get through. The spider tries to communicate telepathically with the master, but fails, thinking her friends have forgotten her and gone home. Severely injured, the mare loses her strength and faints, while the ants finally break through the barrier. At that instant, all Kate does is scream for the master and embrace the mare. In the next scene, she wakes up with Takumi's hand affectionately placed on her head. Kate cries and screams that she begged for her companions to come, and then they explain why the communication failed. Apparently, the barrier the spider created was so robust that it cut off the flow of mana from the outside. Later, now calmer, Kate explains the situation of the dragon mare who was severely injured. Quickly, Takumi tries to apply a healing spell, but it is repelled by the creature itself. Sophia thinks she is cautious, even though she is unconscious. Moreover, the elf feels that other monsters are approaching and that it's very dangerous to stay there for too long. Kate fears the mare will be abandoned and falls into despair, but Takumi assures her that won't happen. With that, he takes the spider and the horse to his other dimension. Sophia thinks it's reckless to put an advanced monster there without a familiar pact besides the tremendous strain it will put on Takumi's body. It replies that he's fine, but soon the weight begins to bend him until he falls to his knees. He even tries to drink a potion to recover, but ends up dropping it and collapses on the ground. Half a day later, the young man was in bed, but still hadn't woken up. Sophia notes that even sleeping, he keeps that dimension running, and unless Kate opens that dimension, the dragon mare will continue inside, causing Takumi to slowly wither. With that in mind, before the master becomes too weak, the elf takes his hand and kisses it to communicate with Kate. Inside the Alchemist's alternate dimension, the elf asks if the spider can remove the mare, but Kate fears the creature will be even more terrified to suddenly appear in an unknown place. However, Sophia explains that Takumi might die if nothing is done, so she asks her friend to create the same barrier she did in the forest, as, without the view of the surroundings, the mare will be less frightened. Finally, Kate likes the idea and promises to follow through with this plan. Having done that, Sophia announces that she will go to the Papek company to buy medicinal herbs for monsters. However, Maria asks to take on that responsibility so that the elf can look after Takumi. So when the human maid leaves, Takumi feels a warmth in his left hand unconsciously, at the same time as he hears the voices of his friends in random moments of their time together. This makes him realize that it's time to wake up. When he grazes his torso, he sees that the warmth in his hand was Sophia holding it. Seeing that the human has woken up, the elf shows surprise and relief, while the master affirms he is happy to have come with his companions. Outside, Maria watches the scene with sparkling eyes, while Takumi needs to go see the dragon mare. Soon they all go to Key's barrier, and noticing that the creature has recovered quite a bit, the alchemist asks if she wants to befriend him, just as she did with Key. At that moment, the boy activates his ability to tame the mare. Then the electricity from the horn passes to the magic circle he opened. With that done, Takumi conjures the high healing and completely regenerates his new partner. Keed asks what her name will be. Remembering that he named the spider because of the maple leaf pattern on her abdomen, the human names the mare Tsubaki, a camellia tree that has leaves all year round and blooms with red and white flowers. Maria thinks that name is beautiful, and the other companions share the opinion. Tsubaki brings her snout closer for Key to pet. Embracing the mare, the spider tells how lonely, sad, and scared she felt when she was injured in the forest, but everything changed when the master came to her rescue. To cement this happiness, Maria invites everyone to a special dinner she will prepare, and of course, everyone accepts the invitation right away. Returning to the royal capital, Bacalatos at the Palom Slave Trade Company, a beast girl with magical aptitude is presented to a customer. Although she vows to strive to acquire new skills, the man responds that he needs someone who is immediately useful, not just someone exotic, as he has no intention of taking care of the girl until she learns something worthwhile. With that, the customer leaves. Then an employee encourages Riva not to be disheartened by what just happened, assuring her that a good master will come along one day. Saddened, the girl lies on her bed and thinks about the words she just heard from her master Burton, the same words she's heard for years. In an old memory, she recalls a special moment with her little brother, which was spoiled by the harsh reality she was about to face. The little boy asked where Riva was going, and in tears, she promised to send a lot of money home. However, despite this promise, reality was proving to be much crueler. At night, Takumi worked in his workshop as he did every day. When dawn breaks, he announces he's heading back to Gambo's atelier since there are some forging jobs that need to be done to procure carriages and horseshoes for Tsubaki. Meanwhile, Sophia and Maria recall that the master recently received an extra order to produce potions and refrigerators for the Paypek company and has been restlessly working. Yet he assures them he's not overexerting himself and leaves anyway. Upon arriving at the Bolton Guild, Takumi overhears a heated discussion between Barak and another man, so he asks Hans what's going on. The receptionist explains that there have been sightings of monsters around the city, and although no one is sure, the matter is causing quite a stir and concern. Hans had drawn a sketch based on witness reports, and by the looks of it, the creature seems quite mysterious. However, no damage has been reported yet, so there is no reason to panic. With that, the employee asks Takumi's reason for visiting, and the alchemist expresses his desire to register another familiar. Before anything, Hans remarks that nothing could surprise him anymore as the adventurer had registered a spider last time. However, when a dragon horse emerges from the other world, the employee cannot hide his horror, especially because comparing his monster sketch with this dragon horse, every detail matches perfectly. In other words, he is facing the animal causing terror around Bolton. Suddenly, the man who was talking with Barak yells that the monster has appeared, and the guild master commands Takumi to follow him immediately. Meanwhile, Sophia walks through the streets and recalls a conversation she had with Mulan. At that time, the mistress lamented that she didn't have any servants with the characteristics the elf was looking for, but promised to contact traders from other cities in search of one. Changing the subject, the human comments that Sophia has changed a lot since she made a contract with Iruma Takumi. Just then, Maria calls out to her friend and informs her that she has finished her part and is now heading to another butcher. After all, she thinks Takumi has been looking exhausted, so she is doing what she can to keep him well nourished as the guy gets so focused on his work that he even forgets to eat. Sophia confesses she would love to relieve the master's burden, but she knows nothing about alchemy. About that, Maria says she will help in the kitchen, and the elf adds that she can lend a hand in that regard at least. However, strangely, Maria frowns and responds that it's not necessary, which makes Sophia wonder if her friend feels insecure about her help. The human admits she does, but the elf feels the same way, so they are on equal footing. Speaking of which, Maria mentions that her friend has changed a lot, appearing more serene than ever, and this elegant side of her is quite adorable. Embarrassed, Sophia deflects and urges her partner to finish shopping quickly and return to Takumi. Speaking of the poor guy, when they arrive at Diambo's workshop, the alchemist is passed out on the floor from exhaustion. The blacksmith regrets not being able to stop the young man when he saw how happy he became working. But if Takumi continues this way, he is certainly going to collapse. Be that as it may, on one hand, the boy is dying from overwork, but on the other, the fruits of his labor can be seen in front of the carriage he himself manufactured. Maria rushes to shout that the interior of the vehicle is marvelous, although Sophia thinks it's a bit of an exaggeration. Inside, Takumi explains that he enchanted the carriage with spatial expansion, creating a true home inside the vehicle, complete with a bathroom, kitchen, and bedrooms for everyone. Delighted with her new living space, Maria takes the reins of Tsubaki and rides towards their destination. Having tea on the couch, Sophia is amazed that despite their traveling at high speed, there is practically no shaking inside the carriage. Takumi asks Maria if there's anything bothering her there, and she responds that they could install blades that pop out from the sides of the vehicle, as that would certainly be cool. Startled, the boy says he'll look into it. Finally, after some time speeding along, Tsubaki levels up and develops some statuses that make her even more powerful. Upon arriving at their destination, Takumi meets with the Lion Fangs and is happy to have this group as his escort. Heath is astonished to see a Draco horse pulling the carriage, until Papek arrives alongside Godwin, Marquis of Bolton, and another man, praising the quality of the Alchemist vehicle. Takumi thanks them for the company to the capital, and Papek is eager to take a look inside the carriage. However, as soon as he enters, he lets out a scream followed by a loud bang, prompting the vehicle's owner to run and see what happened. But it was just Papek, overwhelmed by what he saw. Disbelieving that Takumi produced it alone, the businessman grabs the young man and highlights his unparalleled talent with practically everything he touches, even asking for details of the manufacturing in a frantic manner. Godwin punches the businessman on the head to calm him down, then Papek apologizes for the mishap. In any case, the Marquis confesses that he would feel blessed to have such a vehicle in his possession, and Takumi notices this guy is hinting he wants one too. Then Godwin is more direct, admitting he would like the Alchemist to make him a similar carriage, saying he's willing to pay 100 platinum coins for it. Takumi quickly does the math in his head and realizes that 100 platinum coins are worth 1 billion yen, which is more than 37 million rias. Naturally, the young man is stunned by these figures. One way or another, the journey begins to Bakalatos, the royal capital, and Godwin talks with his companion, stating that Iruma Takumi has made significant contributions to his domain and that surely this young man has everything to evolve further and become known worldwide for his inventions. Moreover, he believes it's his duty to protect the Alchemist from evil people who might be drawn by the money involved. Indeed, the Marquis understands when he needs to protect people in the kingdom of Barcula, but he can't grasp the Holy Empire of Sidonia, as it certainly forces him to never let his guard down. Speaking of the Empire of Sidonia, in that kingdom, many months after the current moment for Takumi, Akayan reads in her room that the goddess Anat created humanity in her image and then created beast men from beasts to serve humanity. Afterwards, she created elves and dwarves from spirits and also gave them to humanity. After reading this, the girl goes to a beast girl in her room and touches her collar with certain disgust. Returning to the present moment, the carriage finally arrives in Bakalatos safely, and the Lion Fangs hardly had any trouble, as whenever any monster appeared, Maria and Sophia quickly took care of the problem. There were times when they didn't even need to stop because Kate and Tsubaki could handle the danger on the move. Papek approaches Takumi and says he'd like to discuss something when they reach the inn. Finally, upon arriving at the inn, a businessman says he will offer the king something similar to Takumi's carriage, as according to him, Godwin said this would be the best way to make His Majesty understand the Alchemist's exceptional talent. He recalls that the audience with the king will be in just 5 days and that it will be difficult to construct a carriage in such a short period, so it would be better to start when they return to Bolton. However, Takumi states there is time to do it, and this news leaves Papek with fire in his eyes to make everything work as quickly as possible. Later, Takumi tells the maids that Papek mentioned a slave company called Palom, where there is a spacious garden that could serve as a workshop for the carriage's manufacture. Sophie remembers that this establishment is owned by a reliable man named Burton and mentions that perhaps the master needs someone to help in this production, as he has worn himself out too much on the trip and has not yet rested enough. Taking advantage of their trip to the Palom company, it would be good for Takumi to look for someone to assist him in this process, since Sophia and Maria have no ability to meddle with alchemy. Sophia says this because she swore her life to protect the masters, but if he does not take care of his own health, it might not be any external threat that poses a danger, but himself, with his insistence on working until the last drop of sweat. Listening to his faithful squire, the alchemist arrives at the Palom company in search of someone with experience in alchemy. Burton comments that he heard Takumi was using alchemy to create a carriage made of mithril and adamantite, and so he has an idea of someone who might be suitable for the job. Outside the company, Maria runs up to Sophia because she can't find Cade. Although the spider was just now beside Tsubaki, it simply vanished. Worried about her friend, the elf joins the search and calls for the spider within the company until she hears Riva screaming in fear because of the arachnid. Sophia scolds her friend and apologizes to the beast girl, who is mesmerized by the elf's appearance. Sophia picks up the book the girl dropped and comments that it seems very old. The young beast girl responds that she is interested in many works about magic and that this one is indeed written a long time ago. It's the Encyclopedia of the Fundamentals of Alchemy, Arnold's style. Sophia asks what that means, and the beast explains that, according to some, alchemy circles are outdated, but she thinks this is the best way to learn the basic concepts of decomposition and recomposition. Then Takumi finds Sophia in the hallway and asks her to accompany him in the process of searching for the candidate to join the group. When the two gather in the room, Burton introduces Riva, who, while Takumi introduces himself, gets caught up in negative thoughts. If this boy also rejects her once again, she won't be able to do anything for her family. When she hears that Takumi needs someone with an interest in alchemy, the girl stands up quickly to respond, but remembers the harsh words of the last client who rejected her. This makes her think she's just useless and shouldn't apply for the job. Sophia encourages Riva and tells her that she has been learning about magic and alchemy on her own at this place. Upon hearing that it involved the encyclopedia Arnold's style, Takumi is delighted and starts discussing this method with Riva, who knows the differences between this and other techniques like the Aaron Martin method. Hopeful, Takumi draws a circle on a sheet of paper and asks the girl if she knows what it's for. Shy and anxious, Riva tries to concentrate as much as possible on the content in search of an answer, analyzing every inch of the illustration to extract the maximum amount of information. This challenge means everything to her, as the feeling of failure that traumatized her leaves her extremely nervous. Overwhelmed by this sensation, Riva starts to cry and says she doesn't know, because in her town they don't use fluffy cream, but rather sweet beekeeper's honey. Takumi stands up and extends his hand to the girl, inviting her to join him as his assistant. Riva is confused as she did not pass the challenge, given that the alchemy circle was nothing like the spiral sweets she knew. But then Takumi explains that it was indeed a circle for that type of sweet. He knew that each region mixed the dough with different ingredients, but using honey really seemed delicious. The point was that Riva had seen this in the moment, and that was exactly what Takumi wanted to see. Thus, the two solidify their agreement, and the new servant asks her master to send all her earnings to her family. The village she comes from is very poor, and she had only found a way to make money by becoming an indentured servant, so her brother could study and provide a better life for their mother. Takumi reminds her that she would remain a slave if she gave all her money to her family, but Sophia argues that the more Riva learns about alchemy, the better her chances of making it on her own one day, possibly paying off her servant's debt and buying her own freedom. In any case, the elf makes it clear that the Beast Girl isn't working for just any master, but for someone extremely kind. Perhaps, even while serving him, Riva might find happiness. Lastly, Takumi introduces the new servant to the other girls, who pounce on the poor thing as if she were a toy. The boy stops Maria and Keed, who enthusiastically introduce themselves to their new companion, making Riva feel that she really could strive among these people. At the present moment, in the castle of the Sacred Empire of Sidonia, the king asks if the stance of the kingdom of Barcula has changed. The messenger reports that he has sent 3 messages, but the replies have always been similar, rejecting the proposal. In that case, the king believes it's time to teach Barcula a lesson, even if it requires being excessively harsh. Consequently, the other man informs that he will gather the knights immediately. However, Princess Elizabeth asks her father for some time, as it won't be long before Sidonia summons the heroes, so any hasty action should be avoided until then. The king argues that they cannot leave this matter unresolved, but Elizabeth believes that in such times they need to use the power of faith, spreading the rumor that someone is disrespecting the Church of Divine Light. The messenger fears this might provoke the wrath of the faithful, but that is precisely what the princess wants, for when that happens, the Divine Light Squadron will begin to act. The following day, the talented alchemist from Vila wowed Riva by creating, through an alchemical circle, a carriage made from adamantite alloy synthesis. Moreover, Takumi shared that the fundamental structure was the same as the one used for spiral sweets. According to him, Riva would soon be able to craft objects as complex as this one. Not so sure about that, the Beast Girl questioned whether the master truly believed it, since it was a very advanced task, but the young man affirmed his conviction. After all, Riva possessed the most important quality an alchemist needs, the sparkle in her eyes when she watches things take form. Because of this, Takumi asked his apprentice to help synthesize some simple components now. As time passed, on the day of the audience with the king of Barcula, Takumi admired a carriage made by his own hands. A gentleman approached and asked if the vehicle belonged to the young man, to which he replied that it would be presented to his royal majesty, although he had made it himself. Upon hearing this, the man was impressed with Iruma Takui's skills, and the boy didn't understand how this man knew his name. Nevertheless, Pepek and Bolton came running and shouting "Your Majesty," referring to the gentleman beside Takumi, who was even more surprised. Apologizing for not having introduced himself earlier, the man revealed he was Lobos Barcula, the ruler of this kingdom. Upon learning this, Takumi went pale and knelt on the ground. Lobos asked him not to be overly formal, while Pepek and Bolton also bowed before the Lord, noting that they thought the audience would be in the reception hall. However, there was a greater reason for the king's visit. He found it utterly boring to have guests rot in a waiting room and then appear surrounded by guards for a meeting. Putting that aside, he expressed eagerness to meet the famous alchemist in person and to thank him for his discoveries without the formalities. The king mentioned this because, thanks to Iruma, the royal capital had a solution for the sewage problem. Demonstrating humility, the king bowed his head in gratitude, noting that normally he would organize a grand banquet and bestow generous rewards and titles of nobility on the young man, but that would draw the attention of the Sardinia Empire, which Takumi did not want, and a king's duty is to protect his people. Internally, Takumi reflected that this ruler truly did not judge by appearances. After this unexpected meeting, King Lobos rewarded the alchemist for solving the sewage issue, and the group left the castle. Lobos asked his servants Simon and Galahad to keep this meeting with Iruma a secret. Simon committed to placing a gag order on everyone in the castle. However, once Barcula exported this magical device to other nations, Iruma's influence would spread further, and nothing could stop it. The king admitted this was his concern because when that happened, the Church of Divine Light would not sit idly by. Several days later, the group of protagonists returned from the royal capital to Bolton, and Takumi officially bought the mansion he had been renting from Papek. During tea that afternoon, Maria surprised the master by once again refusing a salary increase. According to her, Takumi already provided plenty of food and other things, so she was content with the regular allowance she received. Likewise, Sophia refused payment, so Takumi emphasized the importance of saving for the day their contract with him ended. Sophia argued that as an elf, she would live much longer than Takumi, so she had decided to spend even her last days protecting the master's tomb. Maria, on the other hand, wished to live at least one day longer than her master. It would be perfect to place his tomb next to hers. Hearing these things, the young man simply didn't know how to react. Meanwhile, in Sardinia, Elizabeth gained access to the magical device used to purify sewage in Bolton after a spy had infiltrated Bacalados and obtained one with great difficulty. According to the princess, this device was a criminal heresy practiced by beings unafraid of the wrath of Anat, to the extent that even Pope Walbert deeply lamented its existence. The spy highlighted that within the Church of Divine Light, there were those who said Sardinia should eradicate the evil without mercy. Considering that the man was speaking of the Divine Light Squadron, Elizabeth emphasized that the source of this evil was in Bolton, and those who threatened the dignity of the Pope and the goddess Anat would not be tolerated. The next day, Riva confessed to the master that she would like to register at the guild as an adventurer, just like Maria and Sophia. This way, she could enhance her stats as an alchemist and craftswoman and further develop her mana. Regarding this, Takumi emphasized that indeed being an adventurer was a good way to increase mana. Shortly thereafter, the Beast Girl went to the desired location and received her registration card. Besides thanking for the service, Riva complimented Hans for sending money home at a low rate, and he replied that many adventurers like her requested this same service, meaning it was not difficult to do. Moreover, now that another member had just joined Takumi's group, Hans asked if he would like to name the team. After all, despite all members being ranked D, except for Riva, the Alchemist's team was one of the best in the entire guild and should not go unnamed. Embarrassed, Takumi remembered he had never intended to be an adventurer, and moreover, his group did not have a clear division of roles like the Lion's Fangs, for example. In the midst of this, Barak approached the young man and asked to take care of this issue. First, he emphasized that an adventurer's body was his greatest asset, and if you had a strong body, you could survive almost anything that happened. Takumi argued again that he did not want to become an adventurer, but the master promised to train the young man personally. Then we see Takumi being humiliated and beaten mercilessly by the bald man without pity. After gloating over the boy's defeat, Barak asks if he's thought of a name for the team. Takumi, grabbing the first name that comes to mind, suggests we are adventurers. Barak dismisses this ridiculous name and slaps the kid again, who is now feeling 25 years older in the hips after so many falls. Growing impatient, the master inquires what symbolizes the Takumi Iruma born into this world, as the team's name will derive from that answer. Stuttering, Takumi comes up with toilet has arrived, prompting Barak to fling the poor boy into the sky like a frisbee. Amid this, Riva realizes the path to becoming an alchemist is indeed very arduous. After returning home, Takumi brings up the topic with the girls to see if anyone has a better idea than toilet lid for the official group name. Maria tries Lord Takumi and his servants, but the boy fears that Barak would beat him again if he brought that name to him. Riva raises her hand, suggesting an adventurer perfecting alchemy, his bodyguard, maid, pets, and an alchemist in training. Takumi thanks her for the perfectly detailed description, but thinks the name is a bit too long. Maria now tries toilets, fridges, underwear, and Takumi, but the boy fears that name would get him thrown towards space about 5 times. Feeling guilty for suggesting a name that might lead her master to his death, the poor girl sees herself as a walking toilet again. Seeing that the crisis is only escalating, Takumi asks Sophia if she has any ideas. Instead of pondering names, the elf is outraged that Barak left her master in tatters without remorse, promising to beat up that bald giant with the same coldness. Fearing the situation might worsen, Takumi calls for calm and argues that the man was responsible for him honing his intuition, evasion, body control, and martial arts skills just today. Hearing this, Sophia backs down, but Takumi knows this story is far from over. Back at the castle of the Holy Empire of Sardinia, 10 months after the current moment for Takumi, Yamato participates in a sword training session with blood in his eyes. Watching the fight with a smile, Akira notes that the boy continues attacking without retreating, which doesn't work in a real battle. Akane asks if his style works, and Akira responds that he is the hero. The girl reminds him that she and Yamato are also called that, but Akira is done with that talk and invites her for a stroll. She refuses outright, then the guy questions if his colleague is worried about her slave watching her. By the way, he thinks Akane is acting the same way as before they were summoned. Ignoring him as she walks away with her friend, Akane reflects that Akira was still decent back then. Entering her room, Akane reads that Anat created humanity and then created beastmen and elves to serve her. According to what's written, the Church of Divine Light preaches human supremacy. Based on what the girl heard from traders traveling between nations, the Church of Creation teaches that all races are children of Nolan, but being summoned by this nation dominated by the Church of Divine Light, Akane struggles to understand her role. They say she and her peers are there for world peace, but the girl feels something is off. Returning to the present, Takumi gives Riva a ring to activate spells and a staff made of ancient treant and mithril. Ki shows up and admits she is jealous of those cool weapons, so the master gives her a clawed gauntlet, having thought of a weapon that wouldn't hinder the spider when she was manipulating her web, for which he had Riva's help in developing. Delighted, the pet thanks them both. Next, Iruma returns to Barak with his group after deciding they would be called Cat's Claw. Before the alchemist could blink, the giant puts the kid in a sleeper hold along with an arm lock. Maria tries end this big man, Takumi and his servants, then Barak throws the kid to the ground again as if he were a bag of manure. Takumi is afraid Sophia might get furious, until the elf shouts that her master's defense is very loose, advising him to pay more attention to his weaknesses, which are where Barak attacks. After this new encounter, seeing that the guy is devastated, Hans asks in the guild if Takumi wouldn't prefer a little escort mission for now. The alchemist shows interest, so the guild master informs him that with the tuned carriage they have, it would only take 4 days to travel to and from the city of Kilbis. Moreover, Hans mentions that this escort was requested by the Papek company. Takumi asks if the people from Lion Fangs wouldn't be more suited for this task, but the receptionist explains they are on another job. Thus, the only option left for the group leader was to accept this objective, so they set off with their own carriage pulled by Tsubaki, where Cade, Maria, and Riva rode, while the escorted carriage was driven by Sophia, with Takumi and the contractor talking just behind. The man mentions he's carrying daily supplies and magical purification devices. Additionally, the president asked him to buy milk in Kilbis. Takumi gets excited to learn that this city has milk, and even more so to find out that they also have cheese. However, the journey is interrupted when the convoy encounters monsters ahead. According to Sophia, it's a territorial dispute between goblins and forest wolves. Kate orders Tsubaki an axe, so the dragon horse unleashes an electric discharge in the middle of the fight, raising a cloud of dust. When the cloud clears, all the monsters are dead, making the escorted realize they probably won't have any problems reaching safety. Hours later, in the city of Kilbis, Takumi and the girls are amazed by the cream soup served, especially the boy, who savors the nostalgic taste of his original world. He tells Sophia he would like to buy milk and cheese before returning, and she responds that the local market stays open late. At night, everyone gathers to eat bread with cheese, and Takumi reflects that it's only been a few months since he arrived in this world, but it feels like years have passed. Regardless, this is his life now, and he doesn't even know if he'll ever return. He probably only thinks about these things because of the nostalgic taste of the milk and cheese. Speaking of which, he asks Sophia if there's any rice around, and she thinks he might be referring to the grain they eat in the kingdom of Samandor, which isn't available in the Barkila market. Maria mentions that they sell it in the royal capital, and since they just returned from there a few days ago, Takumi is inconsolable for having missed that opportunity. Sophia notices that the boy is acting strangely and wants to know what's up, so he asks the elf if she misses her homeland or the food there, given that she left over a decade ago. Sophia tells him she much prefers the present to the past, as for nearly 50 years she lived under a curse and was a caged bird, but forming a contract with Takumi allowed her live anew. In short, the alchemist gave her wings to escape that cage, and now she only looks forward to the future, where there's no need to dwell on the past. Similarly, Maria says she too is more excited about tomorrow than yesterday, and Riva, Keed, and Tsubaki echo the sentiment. Reflecting on everything that was said, Takumi feels the same, for he too has been given wings to start a new life. Thinking about who granted him this blessing and considering that each member has given wings to one another, Iruma suggests calling their group Wings of Nolan, and everyone loves the idea. 2 days later, after completing their escort mission, the group returns to Bolton at night, but as soon as Takumi enters his house, he is surprised by a cloud of paralyzing poison. Before he knows it, all his companions have been subdued by men in hoods and masks, and just as he was about to be struck by a sword, someone shoots a projectile at the assailant's weapon, giving Takumi a chance to counterattack and defeat the attacker. Save for now, the boy thanks Keed, who is in the mobile dimension, and heals his comrades. Maria doesn't understand how Takumi wasn't affected by the effects of the mist, so the master explains that he and Ki have resistance to poison and paralysis. The spider takes everyone outside to decide what to do with the men she covered in webs after finding them wandering when she came to bring Tsubaki to the stable. Realizing the danger is even greater, Sophia suggests they seek help from the Adventurers Guild, so Takumi sends the elf to fetch Barak. Sometime later, the guild master sends the masked men away by carriage and asks Iruma to report to the Lord immediately, because the problem is very serious. The next day, Marcos Bolton revealed to his subordinates that the intruders who had infiltrated Takumi's house the previous night were from the Divine Light Squadron, an organization tasked with executing those who dare to challenge the commandments of the Divine Light Church. They had been sent by the Holy Empire of Sidonia to take the life of Iruma Takumi for creating the magical sewage purification device. Hearing this, Takumi reflected that previously, light magic was necessary to purify the sewage treatment tanks, and priests from both the Divine Light and the Creation churches took turns performing this task. While the Church of Creation operates on donations and charges nothing to the faithful, the Divine Light Church demands a hefty fee for such services. According to Barak for the Divine Light Church, Takumi was interfering with their main source of revenue. For this reason, the alchemist thought it might be wise to hide in another nation for some time, but Godwin believed he would be safer in Bolton, as the country has a large base of followers of the Church of Creation who could offer support. Consequently, Gala had announced that they would monitor the city's entrances and exits, so Barak concluded that they only needed to stay alert while venturing out. Frightened, Takumi confessed he was thinking about stopping taking missions while this problem was ongoing, but the guild leader wasn't having any of that talk, since Takumi's group was one of the top 5 in the region and his absence would harm the guild. The boy remembered that his life could also be harmed in this ordeal, but no one seemed to care. Either way, Sophia promised to protect her master with her life, and Barak assured he would teach the alchemist how to fend off any attackers that came their way. As they left the meeting, while the elf drove the group's carriage, Takumi reflected on how the Divine Light Church of Sidonia really was after him, putting the lives of Sophia, Maria, and Riva at risk, as had happened the previous night. Next, they went to the Bolton Guild to register the team name as Wings of Nolan, and Hans thought it a fitting tribute to name it after the goddess. Aside from that, the clerk revealed that rumors of the invasion Takumi had suffered at home had spread quickly, along with the notion that there was a large bounty on his head, making the alchemist a highly desirable target for adventurers willing to take on missions outside the guild. At night back home, the Wings of Nolan worried about a possible new attack from the Divine Light Squadron, and Takumi felt guilty for putting his partners at risk, but they all assured they were ready for any new threats and that the mistake made last night would not happen again. Takumi responded that he knew he had Keed and Tsubaki to help, but he felt bad having guards roaming his house all the time to watch over it. Because of this, he was thinking of creating a magical device to erect a barrier around the mansion to prevent anyone not registered in the system from entering, but they still needed to think of something to protect the house when they were on missions. Sophia suggested finding an attacker or a tank, yet before anything, all the other girls made it clear they would not want it to be a man. Regarding that, it was fine for Takumi, but he had no idea where to find someone, and Sophia agreed it was hard to find an adventurer who would quickly create strong bonds within the group, so maybe the alchemist should look into hiring someone from the Milan company, as it would be safer to have someone bound by a magical contract. Hearing this, Riva made it clear she trusted the master even without the contract, then Maria and Sophia affirmed the same thing. At bedtime, Sophia pulled back the curtain of the room and noticed that Takumi was working in his workshop until the wee hours of the morning. When dawn broke, the alchemist called Riva to help him in the process of creating the security device, when suddenly Sophia appeared wanting to help as well, as she would love to learn more about such devices. Thus, Takumi asked her to etch the alchemy circle into the metal plates. Sometime later, after all the circles had been properly projected onto the plates, the lead alchemist positioned them on the floor and sprinkled a powder over each design. Sophia commented that the master had not slept at all last night, and he acknowledged that he had preferred to spend the time thinking of ways to defend themselves in case they were attacked. Speaking of which, Keed appeared in the yard riding Tsubaki. The two were training in a simulated battle against a fake golem, which reminded Riva that golems have a lot to do with the realm of alchemy. Takumi added that the magical circle engraved on their chests was so complex that he hadn't even started to tamper with it until now, and his partner concluded that it would be very interesting to have such a creature serving as a tank for the group. However, for that to happen, Takumi would have to further develop his current level of mana manipulation, as it was not high enough yet. Finally, the boy resumed his work with the protection device, and the completion of the project evolved his mana manipulation to the maximum level, granting him the ability Spell Control. With this new technique, the alchemist believed he could try to create a golem core. Meanwhile, in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, the king learned that the agents of the Divine Light Squadron had been captured but had not taken their own lives in the process. The messengers explained that the men had no time even for that, as they likely used contract magic on them. With that said, it was possible that the enemy had already discovered that the attack had been conducted by the squadron, which was a serious problem. Elizabeth suggested her father delay the negotiation with the Kingdom of Barcula so that Sidonia's plan could be prioritized. Regarding the magical circle in the ruins, Homer revealed he had not managed to analyze it, but it should still be possible to activate the summoning using the explanation written in ancient tomes. With another 2 or 3 months' time, the necessary mana would be gathered for the process. Returning to Takumi, he tries using a magic stone, but it proves more difficult than he anticipated, as Reva reminds him that the golem won't move unless it has a multi-layered magic circle at the control core. Cade wonders why the master is so keen on having a golem, to which he replies it would be an excellent form of protection. The spider argues that he still has all of his companions for that, but the alchemist fears the methods that might be used by the Divine Light Squadron to infiltrate their defenses, as had happened the night before last. Reflecting on this, the man realizes he still needs to enhance his spell control level. With that in mind, Keith questions why he doesn't try taming the golem, sparking a good idea that the boy hadn't considered before, as there's a chance it might work. With this in mind, he consults Sophia about where they might find golems. The elf informs him that in the western area of the Death Forest, there are lost stone golems, as well as iron golems that could appear in the ancient dungeon near Hora's. By the way, Takumi is astonished to learn that real dungeons exist in this world, something he had not known until now, but given this chance, he wants to try an iron golem in the dungeon. However, Sophia emphasizes that it wouldn't be wise to enter a dungeon without the help of a tank or an attacker, a remark that embarrasses Takumi by exposing his lack of experience in the matter. One way or another, they head to the rocky plains west of the Death Forest, where they had hunted Trent on a mission. At one point, they encounter a gigantic stone golem walking through the area, and Takumi is truly amazed by the size and imposing nature of the monster. Sophia says it was a stroke of luck to encounter this golem, as it is likely a representative of the guardian class of the ruins. If they want to defeat this opponent, they will have to aim for the magic stone in its chest, as that is its control core responsible for keeping it upright. Speaking of which, Takumi makes it clear he does not wish to destroy the monster. Suddenly, the golem turns its head completely backward and blinks its eyes in a frightening manner, causing the group to hide in fear. Sophia isn't sure if those eyes are capable of attacking or just detecting the presence of an enemy, but the fact is that this is getting much more dangerous than they had anticipated, so the wisest thing might be to let this golem pass. However, the alchemist doesn't want to hear this talk, because if this monster is that strong, it means it would be even more efficient as an ally. Thinking this, the boy jumps towards the golem, forcing Sophia to dash towards the master to protect him, as do Riva and Maria. At that moment, despite the imminent danger posed by the approach of the giant, Aruma asks the girls not to react, as somehow he feels some kind of connection with the golem, although weak. As he approaches the monster, the boy trembles with fear, but remains standing and relatively firm in the face of the supposed threat. Curiously, he feels no hostility from the stone creature, and upon closer observation, Takumi wonders if this golem that was protecting the ruins had any relation to the goddess Nolan, because if that's the case, it seems that the creature is reacting to Nolan's blessing residing in the human's body. Taking this into account, Takumi raises his hand and activates his ability to tame the guardian golem, leaving the girls in disbelief that it was so easy. Keed asks what the name of the walking boulder will be, and his master names it Titan, because it's the name of a giant in a myth he knows. Apparently, Titan seems to want to say something, and the alchemist presumes he desires a more versatile body, so he invites the giant to accompany him. Sophia remembers that entering the city with such a huge creature will cause widespread panic, so Takumi decides to use the mobile dimension. However, before any measures are taken, vapors emerge from each joint of the golem and it simply collapses. After the dust settles, it emerges in a much smaller size, as if it had disassembled to that point. Enchanted by the cuteness of this creature, Keed asks the master to make it talk, and Takumi promises to do his best to make it happen. Many months after the present moment of Takumi in Sidonia, Akira and Yamato had developed to the point of beating up their trainers, and their arrogance grew as much as they did. Later, Akane sees the two chatting casually with several women of the kingdom, who do everything to have their 5 minutes with the heroes of the nation. She finds this disgraceful, but the guys accuse the girl of being jealous, especially after being so cold to them. Returning to the present moment, Takumi enjoys designing and drawing the new body for the golem. After finalizing the drawing, he can't wait to synthesize the body, but before that, he needs to sort out some things. Soon, he meets with his companions and emphasizes that enemies are after him, so if they are with him, they will be in danger, so he is thinking about dissolving the contract with all of his friends so they can stay away. The three immediately revolt at the thought of this possibility, but Takumi is sure it's the best option. Riva asks who will protect him, and the boy remembers that he tamed Titan, besides Keed and Tsubaki still being his pets and protectors. That said, the Alchemist will pay a sum equivalent to all the salaries up to now so that nothing will be lacking for the three. Listening to each word in silence, Maria finally stands up, points the spear in the master's direction, and emphasizes that if he intends to dissolve the contracts, he will have to go through her first. The man remembers that he cannot let such valuable people to him be in danger for his sake, but Maria thinks that proving their value would be to fight alongside the companion. After all, they are the wings of Nolan. Each other's wings, just as Takumi himself said, and if Takumi loses his wings, he will no longer be able to fly. Making this clear, the girl starts to cry, and Sophia comments that the things said by Takumi, although intended to protect them, was the cruelest thing they could hear. At that moment, Takumi recalls when he first met Maria, and how she pledged to work hard so he would keep her around for many years, just like Riva and Sophia, who also swore their unconditional loyalty. With this in mind, the boy apologizes and confesses that he merely pushed his own feelings away out of immaturity, then backtracks and asks his partners to join him on his journey. Immediately, the three reaffirm their vows of servitude and assure him that their adventure together is just beginning, because, as they promised, their bodies and minds belong to their master, and they owe everything to him. Moved by his companion's loyalty, Haruma Takumi emphasizes that Asas de Nolan is the best team there is. Next, the team encounters the new Titan armor and are nearly blinded by the intensity of its gleam. In turn, with its new voice, the golem expresses its happiness at wearing such resistant skin. Takumi used adamantite alloys for Titan's skeletal structure and mithril alloys for its armor, merging the two into a single, extremely powerful body, equipped with a mace, a shield, and more. Beyond that, Takumi dismantles a shed in the backyard and reveals a hangar he built himself, which houses a giant version of the Titan's armor, which, according to the Alchemist, if the smaller one joins with the larger one, they form the Great Titan. As the smaller golem docks with the larger one and everything operates correctly, the boy feels the true meaning of happiness. Observing this eccentric scene from the sky, Nolan remarks to herself that this kid is really letting loose until another goddess approaches to inform her that traces of Anat's existence have been found. Although she shouldn't exist, it seems that the many years of faith of the Divine Light Church have influenced this event. Moreover, Anat is about to become an evil spirit, and since Sidonia is behind the summoning of heroes, a war may soon erupt on the continent. Nolan knows this conflict is about to begin, but unfortunately, she won't be able to intervene personally. The other goddess asks if this is why she bestowed that blessing on Haruma Takumi, and Nolan confirms that everything depends on that human. In the midst of this, Elizabeth heads to the magical circle of Sidonia, waiting for the great moment that is about to arrive.
In the following scene, we travel back 1 year to a development settlement near Bolton, where a beast woman named Manny mourns at someone's grave until she is summoned by an acquaintance to leave. Tucked inside one of the train's carriages, Manny overhears people discussing how there's nowhere to go but this village, and how the village's economy collapsed because the nobles do whatever they please, leading to a situation the populace couldn't resolve. When things reached that point, the nobles destroyed the village and fled to neighboring countries. Naturally, the people now despise all nobles. Moreover, a woman in the conversation highlights that Manny's husband worked until he fell ill and received no proper treatment, essentially blaming the nobles for his death. A year after the village was abandoned, Bolton learns that the villagers were kindly accepted by Count Rockford at that time. His two subordinates are outraged by the nobles' pettiness in this matter, while Bolton emphasizes that they cannot abandon those who have lost their homes, especially now that Rockford has sent a letter requesting that the refugees be given a new home. With 1,000 of them, it's clear that much land will be needed, so there is only one place where this can be done, The problem is that this territory is known for its many roaming monsters, and clearing them out won't be easy, but they have no other choice, so the path forward is to summon the only person capable of resolving this issue. With that said, we move to Uruma Takumi, who thinks it's a good idea for the Wings of Nolan to challenge a dungeon. Later, upon reaching the door of a labyrinth, the alchemist reflects that it has been a while since he wanted to explore such a place, so among many dungeons, they chose a level 1, listed as the second most difficult. The Beast King Forest, which is a mysterious space with vast skies and woods, despite being underground. Inside the dungeons, even though they are outnumbered, the monsters are stronger than those outside. But Keed was a great help in detecting the presence of enemies, giving the group the advantage of surprise attacks and a chance to defend efficiently. Besides, thanks to Titan, who tanked the monsters' attacks, the Wings of Nolan were able to defeat the bosses on each floor, one by one, and collect the treasures that dropped from them. After a full day of expedition, the team finally reaches the last floor, and everyone is excited for having come so far with almost no damage. Takumi thinks this is because they haven't fallen into any traps, and just as he finishes speaking, he steps on a false floor that triggers a giant iron ball that rolls behind the invaders. However, they manage to run fast enough to escape the danger. Now safe, Keed asks if Titan couldn't have destroyed the iron ball, and Takumi explains that he could have destroyed it. But since he ordered everyone to retreat, the tank followed the order to the letter. In the middle of this conversation, one of the available paths forward magically closes, forcing the team to follow the only remaining alternative. Takumi feels that, apparently, they are being drawn into an uninviting location. Speaking of which, an S-rank Earth Dragon emerges from the shadows, making the alchemist wish he had brought the Great Titan with him to confront this creature. Indeed, the ensuing fight clearly favors the dragon, as the Wings of Nolan can barely keep up with the fierce pace of the winged beast, which forces its opponents to stay on the defensive. Then, in a brief moment of opportunity, Takumi orders Titan and Keed to hold the monster's tail to prevent it from being used. Done and done, the tank holds the tail and the spider casts its web to bind. Sophia takes the chance to thrust her spear into the dragon's limb, followed by Takumi's wind cut, Reva's fire barrage, and Maria's fire lance. Titan is ordered to conjure the light of judgment, and this combination of attacks leads Reva to think the dragon has been defeated, but Takumi knows it wasn't enough. Then, the winged creature rises from the ashes to spit fire at Titan, causing devastating damage. Amidst this, Sophia discovers that the enemy's weak spot is its flank, so Takumi summons Tsubaki to charge at this point with a powerful headbutt. Subsequently, the alchemist approaches the opponent, charges his sword with electrical magic, and throws it at the dragon, which dissipates in the air instantly, declaring the victory of the Wings of Nolan, meaning the final treasure and the dungeon as a whole are theirs. Moreover, to everyone's surprise, Tsubaki grows in size upon evolving. Picking up a piece of the dragon on the ground, Takumi believes he can build interesting things with this material. As soon as they return from the dungeon, the alchemist is summoned by Marquis Godwin Bolton. At the meeting, the Marquis mentions the undeveloped lands in the southern region of his domain, a wild area where no one lives due to the many monsters that pose great danger. In the past, this land was invaded by the Kingdom of Triaria, but not only did they lose that battle, their own kingdom declined after this defeat. Takumi points out that this region is also full of unexplored adamantite and mithril, and Bolton sees in this statement a chance for the alchemist to show interest in these resources. Therefore, he proposes that Uruma build a development settlement on this land. After all, the Marquis heard about the village of Board, where Takumi created a resistant wall around the territory in a short time, proving that the alchemist is more than capable of doing it again. The Marquis's assistant explains that there is a river and a spring about 105 miles south of Bolton, an interesting starting point for building a settlement, because besides the water source, it is relatively far from the monsters. Concerned about her master's situation, Sophia remembers that he is being pursued by the Divine Light Squadron, and Godwin regrets having to make this request at such a delicate moment. But there is a good reason he wishes to see this settlement built hastily. After all, a year ago, a settlement was abandoned after its development was halted due to the corruption of the nobles. Since then, the residents of that village lost their homes and became refugees, now receiving care in Bolton and Rockford. The plan is to build houses for them as quickly as possible. Therefore, Takumi accepts the mission, as he cannot simply leave these people homeless, having been homeless himself a year ago. But the people of Board Village did everything to welcome the boy with open arms. Later, on his mission, the alchemist had declined the offer to have a nightly escort, meaning Nolan's wings went alone to the development area, which had abundant water and a very favorable environment. The group created walls with earth magic, followed by deep moats around the fortress. Then, they developed internal roads, aqueducts, timber groves, and eliminated some monsters nearby. After some time working, Takumi asks Sophia to return to Bolton to summon the new residents of this region. When she arrives there and passes on the information, Godwin can hardly believe that the settlement is already ready to receive the inhabitants after just 10 days of construction. Thus, the convoy with the refugees was sent, and people conversed among themselves about the fact that they were being sent to the southern border, probably to that undeveloped land teeming with monsters, where surely they are being sent to die to no longer burden the nobles. From what they heard, the operations of the settlement were entrusted to a man sent from Bolton, undoubtedly another rich man who sees the poor as disposable pawns. At the end of the journey, the warriors responsible for the convoy's escort are astounded by the size of the wall they encountered at the new settlement, and even more so when they see perfectly erected houses and even a castle in the center of the region. Receiving the escort officer, Takumi shares that he was preparing the soil for agriculture, and that the wall should be good enough to repel invaders, unless it's a dragon, apparently. The officer questions about the castle built, and the alchemist explains that it can serve for the settlement's governors, since there are already enough houses for everyone. Besides, there's a barracks for the knights, and sewage is treated with septic tanks and magical devices. Incredulous, the officer can't believe that this kid managed to develop all this in just over a week, and accuses him of having used magic for it, which Takumi does not deny at any moment. Seeing their new city, a couple of refugees wonder if they will really be able to live there, while Sophia approaches Manny, questioning why she is alone in her new home. Manny explains that her husband died in their old village, and the elf replies that it must be tough to have to run a farm alone, so she would like to know if she is interested in some different work. As the beast woman does not respond, the elf promises to consult her master about it. Manny is surprised to hear that this person had a master, and the servant explains that this man was responsible for building the village, and as everyone is very busy at the moment, he might need someone to cook for him or something like that. With that, the elf goes to talk to Takumi and promises to find the young beast woman there later. Hours later, the alchemist offers Manny the job of attending to his needs in exchange for a salary that will be negotiated later. Right then, the beast woman remembers the conversations in the carriage about how one should no longer trust the nobles, and that her own husband died because of the greed of the rich. With this in mind, Manny decides to refuse the offer, fearing that the future might repeat the past, and she would have to go through another despair after leaving her old village. In the end, she confesses that she cannot trust the young alchemist. Maria tries to explain that Takumi is not like the woman is thinking, but the boy decides to leave that offer aside for now. After leaving the meeting, Manny decides she can no longer stay there after what she said to that noble, as she will surely face some kind of persecution or even worse. In the end, maybe she was so straightforward out of an unconscious sense of justice. Maybe she was just taking out on him what she suffered at the hands of other nobles. Or maybe she was just expressing her frustration at never having been able to do anything about all this. In the midst of this reflection, Manny is attacked while walking to the forest. Immediately, Keed runs to inform his master that a huge number of monsters are invading the territory. Haruma goes to Dorn, the escort officer, and orders that all bridges be raised and that all residents be protected. According to the alchemist, there is no monster capable of crossing the wall, so Nolan's wings will take care of the enemies outside. Meanwhile, Manny runs desperately to the inside of the wall, but had the misfortune of not arriving in time to see the bridge raised. Some residents inform Maria that they could not find this friend anywhere, but that she was seen leaving through the south bridge. Worried about the resident, Uruma summons his group, and they are all transported outside aboard the Great Titan. Manny, facing two monstrous wolves, wonders what she was doing there, but soon concludes that she was born to die precisely in this place. However, just as she was about to be bitten by the wolves, Takumi quickly appears to save the girl and eliminate the creatures with his halberd. After that, Manny reports that there are many other monsters loose, but the boy doesn't think this will be a big problem. Just then, the rest of the group arrives to report that the rest of the enemies have been eliminated, and Takumi jokes to the Beast Woman that they really are the best group. While hearing these words, she notices that the alchemist is injured, so she ties up the wound and apologizes for what she said earlier to him. But Takumi just shows he is happy that the woman wasn't hurt. After all, he won't allow any villager living there to be injured, as he wants everyone to have a peaceful life. At that moment, Manny realizes that this young man is nothing like the nobles she has encountered before, for he is kind and magnificent. Soon, she acknowledges that it might be too late to turn back, but confesses her desire to serve Takumi as previously offered. The alchemist, of course, accepts the girl, and the other girls declare Manny hired and come forward to welcome the new comrade. Back in Bolton, Dorn reports to Marquis Godwin about the resounding success of Urima Takumi in the newly established settlement. Proudly, the Marquis wonders if this town could serve as the cog they are seeking. Meanwhile, in the sacred empire of Sidonia, the king receives a letter from the kingdom of Triaria stating, "Suddenly, a fortress town with a robust castle has been erected on the undeveloped lands near the kingdom of Barcula. Furthermore, it is reported that the knights seen there were sent from Bolton, and it is quite possible that the alchemist is involved, which could be seen as an indirect probing by the Empire of Sidonia. Elizabeth decrees that they can no longer allow the kingdom of Barcula to continue dominating this contest, and that Sidonia must be the sole ruler of this continent." The king asks what his daughter means, and she reveals that the time is ripe for a counterattack. Returning to Takumi, he examines a road and considers using it for trade, until Manny arrives with the lunchboxes the master requested. Suddenly, an energetic surge bursts from the inside of a rock, is channeled out through a hole in the structure, and is expelled across the continent with overwhelming power, blinding and frightening the wings of Nolan, who are far from the source. Keed remarks that he sensed a very unpleasant mana, and Sophia has a bad feeling about this. At that very moment, Takumi remembers that Nolan tampered with time when summoning him to this world, sending the alchemist back a year before the heroes were called. And it has been exactly 1 year since he arrived there, meaning they have finally arrived. In the midst of this, Akira, Yamato, and Akane appear in the mysterious Hall of Sidonia and are greeted by Elizabeth. Over time, Nolan had watched from the arrival of the heroes to their development in the Sacred Empire, just kicking back and relaxing as if she were watching a movie, a rather cool thing to do. One day, another goddess was surprised to see that these humans had reached the rank of a level adventurers just 3 months after being summoned to Sidonia. Surprising, isn't it? It's wise not to underestimate this Chad group. Speaking of which, Nolan believes this nation will soon make its next move. Back at the Empire, Elizabeth announces that it's time to introduce the heroes to all the nations on the continent. Arrogant as ever, Akira Yamato was growing impatient. After all, they are the ones who will save the world and crave the limelight due to their needy, spoiled, foolish, and questionable appearances. The princess explains there was a reason to wait and present them properly to other nations, but now is the right time. Confident that he will show off and prove to everyone that they are the saviors of the nation, Akira notices that Akane doesn't seem very interested in the matter and wants to know why. In turn, the girl pretends it's nothing and responds that traveling each nation as a hero will certainly be amazing. But I think she can't stand this guy's sewer breath. The next day, Takumi shares that the village they developed near the border with Bolton has been named Wedgefort. The road to Bolton was well built, allowing the flow of traders in the area. The local residents are learning from the craftsmen of that big city, enabling them to build their own homes, work as blacksmiths, and as farmers cultivating the crops of the region. Given this, Uruma believes the villagers are living a full life, and in my opinion, which no one asked for, I think so too. Meanwhile, Sophia defeats a beast in the forest alongside her teammates. Keed shows her partner a monster she has never seen before after tying it up with her web. The elf recognizes it as a woodland lizard, an animal that shouldn't be there. With this news, upon returning home, the warrior tells her family that probably the strength of the monsters is growing, although they shouldn't become powerful enough to cause problems for her. Anyway, she feels that things are changing, especially since creatures never seen before are appearing in the area, likely beings from nearby habitats that may be sensing the unusual fluctuation of mana that has pervaded the atmosphere over the last 3 months. Given the situation, Takumi reflects that, if Nolan is right, what happened was the summoning of the heroes. Later, Dorn goes to the alchemist's residence to inform that Barak is requesting his return due to a mission. The young man questions if there is anything unusual in Boston. Then the warrior explains that there's a rumor circulating that the heroes appeared in the sacred empire of Sidonia. Takumi imagines this happened about 3 months ago, and the officer asks, surprised, how the boy knows this. Finally, Sophia emphasizes that the mana fluctuation must be because of this. Afterward, in a meeting among the main group, Manny tries to understand why Sidonia was chosen to receive these heroes, and Maria believes it might be a good omen. Perhaps the goddess summoned them to correct the poor policies of the sacred empire. Later, alone in his room, Takumi ponders that the truth is far from that. In fact, Sidonia wasn't chosen but used forbidden magic to summon the heroes themselves. By the way, all the boy wants is for these heroes to be good people and genuinely intend to fix Sidonia, just as Maria said. Returning to the Empire, at the moment of the heroes' departure, the king wishes them all to be blessed by Anat. When the carriage is opened, Yamato notices that the beast woman colleague of Akane was accompanying them, then angrily questions the reason for this. The heroine explains that Lulu is her assistant, and the man does not understand why she uses the term assistant when the beast woman is a slave. At the same time, Elizabeth and the priests pray for Anat's blessing. The next day, at the Adventurers Guild of Bolton, Hans tells Takumi about what was discovered regarding the summoned heroes, 2 boys and a girl, all 3 with black hair and eyes. In the midst of this, the alchemist starts to imagine that they might be Japanese like him. According to Hans, they are being taken to the Church of Divine Light in the realms of Romalia and Barcula. But these religious visits are just a disguise for Sidonia's real intention, which is to make its presence felt in nations with many followers of the Creation Church to exert a silent pressure. Finally, the receptionist also mentions that the Papik Company requested an escort from the wings of Nolan to the royal capital. When Takumi returns home, Manny asks to accompany this mission. Takumi remembers that this kind of work can be very dangerous, but the beast woman argues that staying in this mansion while everyone else is away seems extremely lonely, which Maria agrees with. In the human's mind, making Manny stay alone after coming to the mansion for the first time today seems very sudden. For her part, Sophia also understands how Manny feels and agrees with what was said. Then, the beast woman herself clasps her hands to beg to go along, remembering that she can be useful with her earth magic. Faced with her pleading look, Takumi can't resist and asks his partner to work with Maria or Reva on the mission, and he commits to registering her in the guild tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the carriage of the heroes, the 2 summoned men complain the entire way that the road is full of stones and the vehicle is shaking terribly. Putting that aside for now, considering that there are many elves in the royal capital of Barcula, where they are headed next, Akira thinks it would be good to take some of them with them, which Yamato finds a great idea, despite remembering that Barcula prohibits its slaves from being taken out of the country. However, his partner remembers that they are heroes, so anyone would be happy to accompany the 2. Besides, Yamato points out that they are top-level adventurers who have already passed level 30, and that soon, no one on the continent will be able to match them. In the midst of this talk, Akane reflects that this is her only chance to do something. In Bakulados, the royal capital of Barcula, the woman feels she will find something she can use to correct the situation, as her revelation skill seems to be indicating. Speaking of Bakulados, Takumi's group heads to the local guild after their escort mission. From now on, he and Sophia will be promoted to rank A and Manny to rank D, so the receptionist will need the guild cards from each of the adventurers. However, in the midst of this conversation, the 3 heroes of Sidonia enter the room. Arrogant as usual, the 2 men order everyone to step aside, even assaulting adventurers who refuse to comply, showing what happens when one is slack with a hero. Then, the 2 notice Sophia and Manny and are enticed by their beauty, expressing their desire to buy the servants. Takumi immediately refuses and asks the heroes to leave if they have no further business, which the summoned Japanese by Sidonia see as a challenge, now demanding that the alchemist hand over the 2 slaves immediately. Sophia and Manny make it clear they have no intention of leaving their master, and that was the last straw for Akira, who draws his sword and advances towards Takumi. Takumi reacts instantly, dodging his opponent's strike and applying decomposition to his sword, causing the blade to break. Yamato, enraged, attacks with his bare hands, but is knocked down by the alchemist. Akira nearly cries seeing his magical sword broken, but being responsible for it, Takumi realizes that the weapon is nothing more than an ordinary sword made of magical iron. By the way, Akira makes it clear that the boy won't get away unscathed after messing with the heroes of Sidonia. But his opponent replies that it is they who won't get away unscathed, as drawing a sword and assaulting adventurers inside the guild is something that should not be done. Either way, Akira and Yamato assure that everyone present will regret opposing the Church of Divine Light. Then they leave. The heroine takes the opportunity to apologize for her companion's behavior and introduces herself as Akane Misato, surprising Takumi with the Japanese name of the girl. Likewise, she is astonished when the boy says his own name. But when she was about to comment on this out loud, Takumi covers her mouth and warns that he will be staying at the Barilago Hotel. As he walks away, Akane reflects that this is the man her revelation ability mentioned. At night, the members of the wings of Nolan present in the Bacalatos Guild talk about what happened with the heroes of Sidonia. Sophia stresses that the two men are unworthy of their post, while Manny regrets that they seem to want to devour them alive. However, the elf recognizes that the woman accompanying the duo seemed decent. Meanwhile, Takumi begins to wonder if he was careless in saying where he would be staying, but Maria assures him that he should not worry because he has his servants. However, Takumi was not talking about his own safety. In the meantime, Akane runs with Lulu through the alleys of the city, disguised with robes that hid their faces. Lulu insists on being left behind, but the heroine asserts that the servant's presence is necessary. At one point, the soldiers notice the two and chase after them, but someone knocks down the guards along the way. It was Sophia, who explains the location of the hotel where Takumi is staying. Further ahead, another soldier chases the two, but Keed ties the man up with her web. After passing through the alley, Akane and Lulu reach the hotel. The heroine goes straight to the point and asks if the alchemist is a descendant of a Japanese who was summoned. The boy remembers that his information should not be leaked to Sidonia, but she promises that she won't tell anyone. Given this, he confesses that he is Japanese, and that his reason for being there is related to the arrival of the summoned heroes. Like Akane, the servants of Takumi also don't understand what this means, so the master finally decides to reveal the truth, as long as this story stays between them. In the meantime, Akira and Yamato find out that Akane has escaped, and a religious leader accompanying the convoy thinks it's better to cancel the visit to Romalia and return to Sidonia because of this, as it will be necessary to review the plans. After revealing that he is an envoy of the goddess Nolan, Takumi leaves all the women speechless, and Akane realizes that the Sacred Empire is the villain of the story, having used a forbidden summoning spell that caused such a problematic change in the mana atmosphere. Either way, Takumi makes it clear that he only intends to live a quiet life as a producer, but that the summoning of the heroes of Sidonia represents a problem, considering they might declare wars against other nations at any moment, although he thinks that not even the heroes can wage large battles without first finding allies. For this reason, the summoned are being used to inflame the masses and gain their support through the influence of the Church of Divine Light. Speaking of which, Takumi asks why those two guys act so arrogantly, and Akane tells him that they weren't like that at the beginning, but their personalities changed since they arrived in this world. Iruma questions what they eat and drink in Sidonia, and the woman responds that she never trusted what was given to them to consume, so she always used a purification spell on the things she was going to eat. In any case, Akira and Yamato began to prioritize the art of the sword instead of developing light magic, and probably this has to do with something in the food and drink that may have caused a kind of brainwashing. Having said this, Akane kneels and begs Takumi to save her and Lulu, as they have been waiting a long time for a chance to escape. Immediately, the alchemist uses the dispel spell on the beast woman's collar, ending the servitude contract she had with Akane, since not even the heroine could stand her friend's condition. Still, Lulu seems desperate and lost when freed, thinking she is being discarded by her master. However, the human makes it clear that the two will continue together forever, and this has nothing to do with any contract of servitude. In fact, Akane wants Lulu by her side as a great friend. Given the situation, the two hug as they resolve the issue. Then Takumi tells them they should head to his mansion in Bolton for starters. Akane thinks they will be a lot of trouble for the alchemist, but he argues that he cannot leave a compatriot behind. Either way, the priority is to get out of the royal capital as soon as possible. With that in mind, the group heads straight to Uruma's residence, and upon arrival, Akane is delighted to be served a creamy stew for dinner, a dish from her homeland. Lulu hesitates to sit at the table, accustomed as she is to her role as a slave. But when she finally joins her former master and tastes the food, she realizes her life has changed from this day forward. Similarly, after a few spoonfuls, Akane lowers her head, making Maria think that the young woman hated her cooking. But in truth, the heroine is moved by eating a dish she never thought she would taste again in her lifetime. Seeing this, Takumi understands why the girl is so excited. She had to stay strong for a long time amidst the madness of Sidonia. And now, having had a taste of home, she can finally relax. Later, in the middle of the night, the guard on the walls of Wedgefort notices the forest becoming strangely swollen. Suddenly, a massive stampede of monsters emerges in his field of vision, so he orders a messenger sent to Bolton as quickly as possible. In his workshop, Takumi plans to speak tomorrow with His Majesty through the Lord about Akane and Lulu. Then, to the surprise of his servants, he gathers them all to break their contracts, as he will soon be in the eye of the storm. The women are outraged that this topic has come up again, but the master explains that this time it's different. He wants them by his side in a new way going forward, as his allies and precious friends, or even as his family. After all, the alchemist has formed a deep bond with each of them and believes this connection would be better represented not by a servitude contract, but through a celebration of a friendship defined by mutual trust, freely and willingly given. Thus, Takumi dissolves the contracts with Maria, Sophia, and Reva, reminding them that Manny does not have one with him. Following this, the smith develops the holy sword Amaterasu and the sublime sword Tsukuyomi, which absorb the mana of the adversary upon striking and accumulate attack strength from it. Suddenly, he receives an emergency alert from the guild, summoning all B-rank adventurers and above due to an attack on Wedgefort.